Anyone that has not put their name and which agenda item they wish to speak on in the chat, if you would do so now, please. And also, if you would mute yourself until you're called on to speak.
Made you look.
I got so nervous for a second.
Okay, are we ready to begin? Good.
Yeah.
This meeting of the Preservation Board is now in session. I'm going to call a roll to establish who's here. If you are here, unmute yourself and say here. Commissioner Robinson, are you here?
Present.
Commissioner Richardson, are you here?
Here.
Commissioner Colleen, are you here?
Here.
Alderman Jack Coder, are you here?
Here.
Tiffany Hamilton, are you here?
Here.
Randy Vines, are you here?
Here.
Melanie Fathman, are you here? Okay, I think we know who is here and who is not here. Would everyone who wishes to speak put your name and the item that you want to speak on in the chat? And that way, when your item comes up, Bethany will be able to tell me who wants to speak on what item. I'll give you a moment to do that, and then we'll begin.
Bethany, how do you actually do that? I hit chat, I don't see a place to write anything.
Where it says type message here.
Are you on a phone or a computer? Oh.
Okay, commissioners, have you seen the agenda? Is there anybody who needs to make a change to the agenda or to recuse themselves from consideration of any item?
Agenda item 1, recuse, Colleen.
Okay, anybody else? Any changes to the agenda? Hearing none, this will be our agenda. Okay, let's try to start. Calling agenda item A, 2827 Oregon. Staff first.
I'm Jan Cameron from the Cultural Resources Office. This is a preliminary review application to construct a 2 semi-detached units on a currently vacant parcel in the Fox Park, I'm sorry, Benton Park, no, Fox Park, Historic District. It's been a long week and it's only Monday. Next. This is the site. It's on a very mixed block. There are a number of demolitions and there's some infill that you'll see in a moment, about 1960. But this is the site. It's currently a very large parcel of which the house that you see in the center of the frame is in the center of it. Next. What's proposed for the site are the 2 blue buildings indicated there that we have, that we're going to talk about tonight. The green building is the existing building, and there is another new construction proposed for the north end of the property, which is not being looked at this evening. Next. This is the site plan, and you will note that the building on the right is substantially withdrawn behind the building line. Okay. The other unit conforms to the building line. Next. This is the front elevation, which follows the historic model example, both of them. Next. And these are perspectives showing the two buildings, and particularly notice the setback of the right-hand building. Next. The standards require that any new construction meet the established building line unless you have a model example, and this model example at 4221 Hebert with a similar setback condition has been submitted as part of the application to have this recession from the building line. Excellent. Rear elevation. This is the south elevation, which is entirely brick of the south unit. This is the north elevation, which is not entirely brick because there is a recessed porch on the right-hand side, and above that is the second story, which is proposed to be sided. The Cultural Resources Office has asked that this section of the elevation be recessed 12 inches to form a more substantial break and to create the appearance of an addition to a historic brick building. And I believe that the applicant has agreed to that. Next. This is the streetscape. You see the building in question on the far left, the existing building, and the proposed new constructions that we're not talking about, so don't look at that, and another existing building. So the floor levels match, the scale matches, everything matches. The only deviation would be the recess of the second unit. Next. Again, this is the site on the far left. And you can see that the adjacent to the south is a very poorly maintained commercial / industrial building. Next. We're proceeding north on the same side of Oregon. This would be the site of the proposed new construction. Next. And continue up. So you see the building line is consistent, but the scale of the property differs. Next. Now we're on the opposite side of the street, proceeding back south towards our property. And this is the new infill from the 50s that has replaced probably some very lovely mid-19th century houses. Next. Now we're getting towards PESTALOZZI, which is the south boundary of the block. And again, we have a very large parking lot. Next. And that's PESTALOZZI looking from the north southward to the Quick Trip. And again, looking north from PESTALOZZI up towards the block, and our property is on the left-hand side. So based upon the standards that say that setbacks can be placed as a model example, the staff is recommending that the board grant approval subject to that 12-foot setback on one side. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let's hear from the applicant.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Killeen. So the, Jan, I assume you meant 12 inches when you summarized there. I think you said 12 feet. So it's the 12-inch setback you were asking for?
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I think we'd have a tough time making the inside work at 12 feet. But even at 12 inches, that's still a little bit tight. I just talked to my project manager, and she wanted to just clarify that the 12-inch setback that my client had agreed to was for that single family. We can make it work over there, but this building, these duplexes, it's really tight to make that 12-inch setback work. And you know, as we all know, we have so many developers who come before us who just try to get away with the bare minimum, just go back 8 feet of brick or 4 feet of brick. My client is agreeing to put a whole lot of brick on both sides of this building and would hope that he could maintain that full width of the building in the back to make the plan work. It's just kind of tight back there. To take a foot out of the whole plan kind of throws things off. So we would ask that that we be allowed to keep the plan as drawn. Thank you.
Bethany, has anyone signed up to speak?
Yes, I just have one, Jay Reeves.
Hi, everyone. Jay Reeves. I'm 2700 block of Allen Avenue in the Fox Park neighborhood, and I work volunteer as the chair for the Development and Historic Standards Committee in the neighborhood. We get to talk through with projects like this as they come in the neighborhood, and we're excited to see this one. So everybody hears me okay, and that's fine?
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks, guys. So of these projects, we reviewed both the 2-family that's in question and the single family that's not on our board. And I just want to point out we have enthusiastic support for the single family, and the 2-family, we very much like the project. It's a handsome set of buildings, and we think that, you know, projects like this would not be built by developers if it wasn't for these historic district standards. So we're really happy that it's been shaped this way. We did not write a letter of support for this project, and just wanted to share for a moment why with the board. Some of that's kind of come together today in explanation, but this project we think works so well on so many levels. But when we saw the site plan and that 3-dimensional view, we were a little puzzled about those competing front porches. Jan, is it possible to go to that little slide that had the model example there with the 3-dimensional view next to it?
Keep going, one more. Going. There we go.
Excellent. That's perfect. Right. So, you know, that 3D view on the bottom left, we just thought was a little clunky with that porch, the 2 porches and the handrails all overlapping in that way. And our group kind of astutely said, well, you know, if that just followed the same step back of the street, it would solve for that bit of messiness that we're seeing there. And so our comments, we've been talking with Mike's team for quite a while, and they've been talking with their client as well. We know there's a lot of tight issues on this, but we didn't see the model example until today, and so we kind of see what they're trying, the argument they're trying to make. But from our perspective, this is just a really beautiful set of buildings, and those porches are just kind of too bad, if you will. And so I would just point to the model example, that model example is on a street of all pedestrian, you know, it's built right up to the sidewalk. And that stair, while it's not really visible well in this model, is a great little marble stair that's bound by the building. It doesn't project into the other staircase like the one on the left does. So that's really the only reason, as we talked through, the architect was considering with their client to see if that was something that was going to be able to bring those 2 facades together. It turned out that didn't work out for the client. So we had a reservation about giving a full endorsement for this project just because of that element. That said, my committee has really asked me to be sure that while we didn't end up seeing a revised site plan, we would think it's better with a little revision there. But by that same token, we really want this project to go forward because we think it's a great project. It's very good looking, and it's a block that could really use this kind of attention. As Mike had said, the investment and what these guys are talking about for details, we think is really valuable. And so we're in strong support of all that. Our hang up was this on the front that we kind of been holding on to until the last day or so to see if that was going to be sorted out. So I'd also like to add that the setback in the back, you know, we don't want to get in the way of Jan and Mike's discussion, but our neighborhood discussion did not have any criticism of that 12-inch step back. So we weren't trying to go to the mat for that, but so we just want to share what our community response was for that one for you. Thanks.
Great. Is there anybody else on this chat who would like to speak on this subject? Okay, thank you very much. That concludes the testimony on this subject. Commissioner Hamilton, have you got a motion? You'll have to unmute. There you go.
I know. I was preparing for my motion. The motion is that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval for the proposed buildings at 2827 and 2829 Oregon Avenue with the condition that the appropriate model example be submitted for 2829 Oregon, that 2827 Oregon be revised to recess this section proposed to be cited, and that the final plans, details, and exterior materials be reviewed and approved by Cultural Resources Office.
Is there a second? Oh, somebody needs to unmute the second.
This is Alderman Coder. I'll second it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion among the commissioners?
I have a question for Commissioner Colleen. Are you there? Oh, hey. So Jay Reeves raised an interesting point about the stairs in the front. And I don't know, have you considered what kind of to make that revision in the plans, and what are the drawbacks or the pros to doing so?
Well, it would be delightful if we could put that same stair in that was in the model example. If the permit office would allow us to do that, we'd do it. It's just the code is written now that after you get up, I think it's 3 steps or 3 risers, you've got to have a landing. So that's why it's changed the look of the front of the building. So, you know, we could look into that and see if we can get, it would actually save the client money. I'm sure he'd prefer to do it that way.
Okay.
Yeah, that way the stairs would tuck in, and I agree with them. They don't look like they've always been there. That would be the goal. If I might add too, that 12 inches, I don't know if there's a compromise, maybe we could do 6 or something, but that is a fairly important issue. Commissioner Hamilton, you made that motion.
Thank you.
Anything else? Yeah, Randy?
No, I'm question.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, there's a motion on the floor that's been made and seconded. For ease of keeping notes in this, I'm going to have to do this as a roll. Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, excuse me, he is recused. Commissioner Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, that is all yeses among our commissioners. And this motion carries. Congratulations. Is there anyone who wishes to speak on agenda item B who has not yet registered in chat? Okay. Then I presume that everybody who wishes to speak has. Barb Burkett.
Yeah.
During the weekend, many commissioners and the CRO staff received requests to table this motion until a moment in the after time when a larger group could be gathered. And I asked you then for a legal opinion on what such a motion, if it passed, would mean. Could you tell us now, please?
The statute requires, our code requires this item to be considered within 45 days. So today would be the day it needs to be considered. If no decision were rendered, it would be deemed approved and it would move on. This doesn't happen very often in this board, but there was no March meeting because of the public health emergency. So we're just looking at a time deadline here.
Okay, thank you very much. Calling agenda item B, 5600 Oakland Avenue. Staff?
Thank you, Richard. I'm Dan Krasnoff, Cultural Resources Director for the City of St. Louis, and I will be presenting 5600 Oakland Avenue. Before I start, I just want to ask a clarification of the staff and the host at 1520 Market. You all will operate the PowerPoint, correct, regardless of who's speaking if they're remote?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that, especially for other people who might speak from a PowerPoint as well. All right, I'm Dan Krasnoff, I'm Cultural Resources Director, and this is consideration of demolition at 5600 Oakland Avenue for the St. Louis Community College at the Forest Park campus. The proposal is to demolish 2 building sections on the campus. This is an application, not a preliminary review, and no staff action has been taken on this proposal. So this will be the first time an approval or denial, et cetera, has happened on this project. Barb kind of just spoke to the whys and wherefores of the timing of the review. I'm submitting the following items into the record since this is on the record. These items will be placed on the preservation board agenda beginning in the next day or so once the meeting is over, and that's where the public will be able to access the materials that are being entered into the record today. With that, I will enter the following items into the record: the application, accompanying plans and photos, the PowerPoint presentation that I'm giving today, the PowerPoint presentation of the community college, certified copies of ordinances 64689, 64925, and 64832. There are approximately 8 emails requesting that the matter be tabled until a hearing can be held with greater public participation, although I think there is public participation. And included in those messages were from the Landmarks Association and Missouri Preservation. There are 3 letters from what I will refer to as academic architects and architectural historians. And those items will be entered into the record. I did receive photographs from John Gunther, who I think we will probably hear from later. I would also enter those into the record. And because it was too late to send those electronically to the Preservation Board members, I will be showing them to you personally. I think Mr. Gunther wants to speak when he speaks. If Mr. Gunther chooses not to speak, I will show them later in the hearing.
Dan Krasnoff?
Yes.
It's Callow.
Yes, Richard.
The architectural historian / architects, there
Yes.
are, you said 3 letters?
Yes.
Are they 100 pages each?
Yes. No, they are not.
How long are they?
They're each a few paragraphs.
Okay, would you read those into this meeting, please?
I will.
Thank
I'll go
you.
ahead. The first one I'm going to read is, let me get my act together here. First one I'm going to read is from Andrew Weil. I told Andrew I would enter his into the record. To the Preservation Board, I am writing to formally request that the application to demolish 2 high merit buildings on the campus of St. Louis Community College at Forest Park be tabled until such a time as citizens have the ability to exercise their right to participate fully in a public meeting on this matter. These buildings were constructed with public money. Public money will be spent to tear them down. With current restrictions on public meetings and planned remote meetings of the Preservation Board, the Landmarks Association believes any action on this matter would unreasonably deny the rights of citizens to have their voices heard, to fully access the public hearing. There are significant technological disparities among the residents of St. Louis, and any decision made via digital communication during this time of mandated isolation would amount to disenfranchisement. He also writes he formally requests that the board vote to table the demolition request for the buildings in question until we as a community are able to return to normal meeting procedure. So I did want to get Andrew's on the record. Let's see. I apologize. The next one I will read is from John Gunther. from the St. Louis and Missouri Valley chapters of the Society of Architectural Historians. We, the Board of Directors of the Society of Architectural Historians of St. Louis and Missouri Valley, wish to express our grave concern regarding the potential demolition of towers A and B of the St. Louis Community College at Forest Park. The Community College at Forest Park was designed and constructed between 1964 and 69 as an integrated modern campus by acclaimed modernist architect Harry Weiss, FAIA, along with younger brother Ben Weiss and Dan Kiley, one of the most important and influential modernist landscape architects of the 20th century. 35-acre campus intended to house 7,000 full-time day students was originated as a 4-story complex arranged along 2 horizontal spines, which framed a series of outdoor landscaped courtyards. Note, these buildings and campus were listed in the expanded significant properties list of the thematic survey of the modernist movement, non-residential architecture, 1945 to 75 in St. Louis City, prepared by the City of St. Louis Cultural Resources Office, that's us, City of St. Louis, Missouri, July 31st, 2013. The report stated that the expanded significant properties list was created by filtering through the RLS properties to find a selection of properties that appeared to meet the necessary level of integrity to be considered eligible for listing on the National Register, that offered some degree of geographic diversity across the city, and that offered a cross-section of building types and uses. The properties represented a good example of mid-century or post-war architectural style building types, whenever high style or vernacular its expression, end quote. In 1994, Harry Weiss and Associates design for the Forest Park Community College won the first ever 25-year award bestowed by the AIA St. Louis chapter for buildings that have withstood the test of time. Harry Weiss's legacy is one of great modern architecture across our nation. He is also known for his preservation efforts and advocacy to preserve our built history. We should do no less in advocating for the preservation of this most important design in higher education in our own community. We understand that the College Resources Office Preservation Board will hold a video conference meeting on Monday, April 27th, 2020 at 4 p.m. to review a request by the Junior College District of St. Louis for the demolition of buildings A and B on the St. Louis Community College Forest Park campus at 5600 Oakland Avenue in Ward 17. Given the nature of this consequential decision, we ask the meeting be postponed or rescheduled to a later date to allow for a fuller public participation as mandated by statute. That's letter number 1. Letter number 2 is from Robert Brugman, Distinguished Professor Emeritus of Art History, Architecture, and Urban Planning at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Dear Mr. Krasnov, having heard from Cynthia Weiss about the proposal to demolish parts of the Forest Park Community College, as an architectural historian and author of The Architecture of Harry Weiss, published by W.W. Norton in 2010, I just wanted to add my voice to those expressing consternation at the prospect of a hasty demolition of a substantial piece of one of the largest and most conspicuous commissions of Harry Weiss and Associates, and one of the most intact and powerful architectural complexes of the post-war era in America. It is, for example, one of the few building complexes in the country to be subject of an entire book, The Architecture of Forest Park Community College by Ronald E. Schmidt, published in 2009. I think this complex with architecture by the Weiss firm and landscape by famed landscape designer Dan Kiley is in that awkward period where it is no longer new, but yet not old enough to be seen as historic by much of the public. I have no doubt that already by 2025, this demolition proposal would never have been made because already by then the building's place in history would have been secured. This is the moment when the complex is at its most vulnerable and it requires the most careful attention and stewardship. Certainly a call for demolition should be undertaken only after the most careful consideration and full public notice. So if you'll bear with me, I seem to not have one of these letters immediately in front of me. Just a moment here. Let me see if I can get that going. Okay, so can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this last one is from Cynthia Weiss. Dear Mr. Krasnoff, I understand the agenda for the Preservation Board meeting on Monday includes a vote on demolishing 2 towers of the Forest Park Community College. I am the wife and partner of Ben Weiss, who with his brother Harry was responsible for their design and execution. Ben worked with his brother until 1977 when we started our office. I was also Dean of the School of Architecture at Washington University from 1993 to 2005. The powerful linear form of the campus responds directly to location on what, even in 1960, was a relatively fast freeway, then responded both to the scale of the city and the brick construction so common to St. Louis. They have a human quality, which was a hallmark of Ben and Harry's work. The two were opposed to the rigid, glassy modernism prevalent at the time. Instead, they looked for inspiration to Scandinavian countries with their mastery of scale and detail. The buildings were very well built and for many years beautifully maintained. When I came to St. Louis as dean, I was pleased to see that the faculty and students of the architectural community all appreciated the value of the buildings. This continues even today. Many generations of architects have learned from their timeless qualities. At this moment in time, when the Earth's resources are strained, it is wasteful to demolish significant buildings without great thought. There is much embodied energy in these structures. It is also important that there be a public meeting to discuss this, with input from all concerned. Indeed, to have an online meeting during a pandemic when people are preoccupied with personal health and family issues and working remotely could easily be perceived as quite negatively. Thank you for your consideration. Sincerely, Cynthia Weiss, Weiss Langley Weiss, Dean Emerita, School of Architecture, Washington University.
Thank you, Dan. You got a staff presentation?
I do.
Chairman?
Yes.
This is Barbara. May I ask Dan a question?
I'm sorry, I could not understand anything you just said.
Oh, may I address a question to the Chairman Krasnoff or to Director Krasnoff?
Yes.
Director, you also had comments from Mr. Hart and Jay Ryder, Janet Stanford, Sarah Duffy, and Betsy Kellerman. Is that correct?
I did.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, and those are all being entered into the record?
Correct.
Okay.
Those messages were all very similar in tone, asking for the meeting to be, this to be tabled to a time when there could be an in-person meeting. So
Okay,
I
and they
characterize those
okay.
instead of read them directly.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So let me get back to the staff presentation, if you'll bear with me for a moment. I think I've said that already 16 times in this brief presentation so far. So again, this is the consideration of these demolitions over on Oakland Avenue. My recommendation is that the board approve this proposal, and I do not say that with any joy or happiness. It's very hard to make this recommendation based on the architecture, but I do believe that based on criteria D, the reuse potential of buildings A and B, and the fact that we have commonly controlled property and we have unusual circumstances, particularly relating to the desire of the campus to the university leadership to make changes to, in their mind, improve the campus. I am offering support for their proposal based on the recommendation, based on the criteria in the ordinance. First thing I would say is the folks we just heard from in the letter do a great job of identifying why this modernist campus has architectural value. And I can't disagree with that. In fact, I do agree. That's why in the staff report it is referred to as a high merit building. What I have confronted as director in reviewing this application is that the campus as it sits now, which is barely changed from when it was constructed in the mid-1960s, I am very confident in the minds of the community college met the needs of the students and the institution at that time. I'm also aware that it's quite possible that the current administration and current students, more than 50 years later, do not feel that the way the campus is configured and constructed meets their needs today. And I think it's the kind of the classic conundrum in historic preservation of balancing preservation of the historic environment with the needs of the current users that we are grappling with here today. So with that, I'd like to go through the slides in the PowerPoint and talk about the campus itself through images. So if we could go to the next slide. So this is a site plan or a image from the staff report regarding the campus. In the upper right-hand corner, you see the building that says CNHS. That's the new building that was built for the health sciences that the administration representatives can speak to today. Immediately south of there, below that are two sections of building that are outlined in dashes. Those are buildings A on the right and B on the left, and they are proposed for demolition. The two sections immediately to the west of there that are not in dashes, C and D, are proposed for preservation, as is the rest of the rest of the buildings on the campus. So I think what you're seeing here is what I would consider a partial demolition of some of the campus. Much of the campus will remain. And there are some key elements to the campus that are remaining that I think are even more important to the design of it than are A and B. And I'd like to explain those as we go along. Next slide, please. So this is a view of buildings A and B. We are sort of at the western end rather, of those two buildings. We are looking to the east. Because of the construction fence around there, it's a little bit difficult to get to the buildings in the way I would normally like to for photographs, but I think we can see that this is a very strong architectural statement. These brick fronted structures are in the brutalist style. They have a very monumental kind of quality to them. They have large expanses of unbroken brick with sections of narrow vertical and horizontal windows. Next slide, please. This is a view of the western end of building A. To the right is the new College of Health Careers structure. To the left is the west end of building A. One challenge that we face in the city in terms of our codes is that this isn't a preservation review district. So there's review of demolition, but there is not review of new construction in general in this neck of the woods. So the community college was complete within their rights to come and propose a building where they proposed it and go get a building permit and build it. And they have done that here. They have, I think it's a well-designed building by KAI Architects. I think it's designed in a very contemporary fashion, which there's nothing wrong with that. And I actually think, unfortunately, the siting of the new building creates a very awkward juxtaposition with the historic building A. And because of that, I think there's a very cluttered, claustrophobic feel to this that that does inherently mar the original design of the building and the conception of Weiss at this end of the campus. So I think even if these buildings were going to remain, it would be hard to argue that they are in the same context. Next slide, please. So here we have a view of the Health Careers building along with building A behind it. And as you can see, I'll just repeat that I think the Health Careers building creates a nice presence on Oakland Avenue. It also blocks the view of building A from Oakland Avenue significantly, almost entirely actually. And therefore building A is not really the building A it's been historically based on that construction. Next slide, please. So the reason I'm showing this slide is it's a picture from Street View from 2011 of building A before any of the new construction. And I think you can see here how much the landscape and the streetscape along this section of Oakland Avenue has changed based on the new construction. Next slide, please. So this is the south facade of buildings A and B. One of the defining elements of the south facade are these large kind of massive stair towers that connect out of the buildings down to the lower levels. And you see the verticality of those windows on the second level. The first level is in kind of an open colonnade, and then above that are very narrow, mostly horizontal windows with kind of monolithic brick facade above that. Next slide, please. I just want to, for a moment, talk about the streetscape. The community college is very much a self-contained architectural element here. This is looking west on Oakland Avenue. On the left-hand side, you see the Performing Arts Center that fronts along Oakland. That's part of the original Weiss design that is not going to be affected by this proposal at all. And off in the distance, you see the redevelopment of the arena site with a Hampton Inn, and I think it's a Hampton Inn, and the office buildings for the Highlands development. That's the right-hand slide. On the left-hand slide, you see the corner of Macklind Avenue and Oakland looking east. We see the two sort of mid-century modern buildings. One was, I think, originally a bank building, and next to it is another mid-century modern building. And beyond that are institutional buildings such as the Science Center, the Compton Drew Middle School, and St. Louis University High School. You know, I really, in one sense, I think the new construction does kind of continue the streetscape along Oakland, but also largely I consider those elements of the community college are almost self-contained here. There wasn't historically, I think, a big relationship between the surrounding blocks, and there really isn't any more or less now based on this new proposal. Next slide, please. This is an image, and I will let the applicant speak to this much more clearly, but this is an image of the proposal for the site after redevelopment. The community college has expressed to me that one of their master plan desires is to create an entryway into the campus off of Oakland that opens up the campus more, and they can explain what they mean by that. I think, again, I think it's difficult to tell an institution that serves such an important need in the community as the community colleges do, that they really don't have a lot of flexibility on their campus based on this situation that they face with the buildings they've inherited. And in my judgment, frankly, since they built the new building, having the change they want to make is certainly not an ideal situation. But I will also say that creating a space between this 21st century building and the mid-century modern building to the lower left, building C, will clarify what's, will give the historic Weiss design some space away from that building and let it sit more on its own in less of a cluttered kind of claustrophobic atmosphere. Next slide, please. So I've decided to come back to this image of the campus again because I just want to reinforce how important I think it is to consider what I think is the unusual circumstances of the desire of the university in the 21st century to have some room to evolve the institution for students as it sees necessary, while I do believe they need to be thinking about the architectural legacy they've inherited. And I think the new building really makes building A, it just compromises its original environment to a great degree. And building B, they think they need an entrance off of Oakland Avenue. I want to be respectful of that. They want to create some new green space with some new land, and based on a new landscape plan that their architects will speak to. And as much as, we see demolitions where there's a for-profit developer, and not to be hard on those for-profit developers, but the end game for them is financial profit. The end game for this institution is trying to serve its students and trying to serve the needs of the community and those folks. And I am willing to give them more leeway than I probably would a private developer, because I think they are built to suit a public need. And I'm uncomfortable telling them as Cultural Resources Director that I know how to reuse their buildings better than they do. I am glad that this is the extent of demolition being proposed. If they had proposed more, I would have been much more uncomfortable with this, and I'm glad that the scope of this ends at building B. The other thing I want to point out is on the left-hand side of the slide, and this is where I wish I had a pointer, you'll see there's a rectangular space created by Oakland Avenue. The linear buildings at the southern side of sort of diametrical from A, B, and C, and D. And then the Performing Arts Center sort of on the upper left, and on the upper right is the library. And there was mention in the letters, the very well-written letters by the architectural historians about, and architects about the vision of Kylie. I really think Kylie's best vision in this project is on the plaza space that's remaining and will continue to function in the same way it always has. There was some very dramatic Kylie plans for a water feature around buildings A and B that you'll see in the architect presentation that were never realized. And I think that with respect to the landscape planning, I really do think maintaining and enhancing that plaza space is important to the future of the design that was brought forth. Next slide, please. So I just want to take a moment to explore that plaza space. So we're standing deep in the plaza. So straight ahead of you is Oakland Avenue, and then across that Highway 40, and across that is Forest Park. On the left is the Weiss designed Performing Arts Center, which is still extant, which there are no plans to alter or change. And the leaders from the institution can speak to that, but that's what's been communicated to me. I believe that in the Weiss design that this was really a focal point for the campus, this plaza space. And if we could go to the next slide. This is again in the plaza space. So we were just looking at the Performing Arts Center. That's on the immediate left in this slide. This is a slide looking across the plaza at the library and at the western end of building D. Again, you see there's this pattern of trees cut into the hardscape in the middle of this. And I regret to mention I did not put a picture of this, but in the middle of that there's a deep fountain that was constructed that serves in the middle of this plaza space. And I think it's this plaza space that is really the most noteworthy part of the design and that is untouched by this demolition that's proposed. Could we see the next slide, please? And then this is looking sort of at the southern end of the plaza. Here you can see our buildings F and G. Building E is kind of immediately to your right. Again, this part of the plaza is being maintained. And I actually think of all the Weiss designed buildings, this is kind of in a way, one of the best examples. It's got a little more glazing than some of the other elements, which I realize one of the components of brutalist architecture is large expanses of unbroken usually concrete, in this case masonry brick, but I think this is a very elegantly designed section of the campus that is being preserved and again helps form this really lovely public space that is worn, and I would like to see more investment in it to help kind of bring it back up a little bit, because I think it's a little neglected here. But I will say that I think the building sections A and B are substantial, and I don't want to undervalue that. But this is a very large campus with lots of acreage and square footage of Weiss design building. And most of it is staying intact based on this application. The exception being those two building sections at the eastern edge towards the gymnasium. And I think it's worth keeping, I'm trying to put some perspective on the difference between the amount of demolition going on here and all the buildings that are being preserved. That my understanding, and this can be asked of the applicants, there are no plans to remove, demolish, alter from the original Weiss design. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's the end of my slides. I'm grateful for everyone's willingness to listen to this presentation. I'd just like to very quickly go through the criteria in the ordinance in order. This will be very fast. So criteria A is there a redevelopment plan that calls for the building's demolition? There is not. Actually, if we could go back one slide. I hate having a blank screen there. Thank you. Criteria B is architectural quality. I am not going to compete with the writers of the letters about that I read into the record about the description of the design of this building. And I think through the pictures we've all just seen, that those pictures bear out the modernist nature of this building, the linear forms of the two sections, one of which is proposed for demolition for a portion of it. This is a building sort of in the high modernist period, campus in the high modernist period, and a section of it is proposed for demolition. It is high merit, it is individually eligible for the National Register. It was one of the top 25 buildings on our architectural modernist survey. And as the director, I acknowledge that, and will say that it is a high merit building, and therefore criteria A, D, F, or G needs to dictate that demolition is appropriate or demolition cannot be approved. Also, because it's high merit, demolition must be approved by the board. If it is approved, it cannot be approved by the staff. The next criteria is condition. Simply put, the building will continue to stand for 6 months. There is a section under this about structurally attached buildings. Obviously, buildings B and C are structurally attached. I am confident that the applicant has hired competent architects and engineers and construction crews who can separate the buildings. They'll put a new end on building C, which they'll speak to, and that will be handled appropriately if demolition is approved. Criterion D is neighborhood effect and reuse potential. Neighborhood potential really doesn't kind of count here too much because you have a single use for an academic institution. And usually neighborhood potential is around issues of, are the surrounding buildings well maintained? They are well maintained. That's not really an issue here. The issue under D to me is reuse potential. I've had substantial conversations with the community college. They explained to me why they felt like they needed to move their health sciences uses out of buildings A and B and into the new building. They will speak to that extensively, but I found that persuasive to allow for the demolition of these two building sections. And that's where I came down on that D is indicative of, does indicate that demolition is appropriate. Under urban design, you lose the two mid-century modern sections of buildings A and B, obviously, and you gain a 21st century building along Oakland Avenue. And again, I believe that new construction building compromises the original siting of Building A in such a way that I just think it has lost some of its architectural value due to that. The next criteria is section F, and I do want to embellish one thing from the standards here. Under F, under proposed, it says proposed construction would equal or exceed the contribution of the structure to the integrity of the existing streetscape and block face. Proposal for creation of vacant land by demolition in question will be evaluated as the appropriate use of that particular site on that block. So you have two aspects of subsequent construction. One is already constructed, and that is the building for the health sciences. The other is the proposed changes to the landscape design where the buildings now stand. I do think that the community college has expressed why they feel that this open space and landscaped area is in their best interest, in the interest of the institution. And again, their interest isn't a private interest, it's a public interest. They're a public institution. And I think their needs and concerns are worthy of consideration here. So I believe that under F, I do not believe what they're building is necessarily of greater architectural value, but I do think it does enhance the Oakland streetscape, and I think there's logic to why they feel they want that entrance and that landscaping plan off of Oakland. Finally, the next criteria is commonly controlled property. If a demolition application, the ordinance says if a demolition application concerns property adjoining occupied property, and common control of both properties is documented, favorable consideration will generally be given to appropriate reuse proposals. Appropriate uses shall include those allowed under current zoning, reuse for an expansion of existing conforming commercial or industrial use, or use consistent with presently conforming use group. The potential for substantial expansion of an existing adjacent commercial use will be given due consideration. It's an institution, it's not commercial, but at the end of the day, we have commonly controlled property here. And I would go back to the desire of the institution to remake a part of their campus for their current 21st century needs while leaving most of the 1960s campus intact in basically the same configuration it was when it was completed. Their criteria H is not applicable. I've spoken for quite some time. I appreciate everyone's patience with my presentation and am prepared to answer questions from the board.
Commissioner Vines, have you got a question?
Yes, I do. I was just curious, looking at some of the photos that were shared and in the presentation, it looks like the buildings are already under demolition. Is that correct?
I had a feeling this question might come up in this conversation. I will, I am going, how do I want to answer that? I will say a couple things. One is the applicant can speak to that most directly, not me. I do not consider what I've been told by the applicant to mean they are demolishing the building. That is, if you deny demolition today and deny demolition forever, the buildings can certainly be reused based on what's happening on the campus today. They would need to go put windows back in that have been removed. And I'll leave it at that. I really want the applicant to answer that question because they are the most knowledgeable about the status of those changes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's really the sticking point for me. I think the rest of your presentation answered my other questions, but that's the one that is sticking out. Thanks.
And Randy, if I could, I'm not trying to be coy with you.
Yeah.
I really just feel like they have a reasonable explanation for that, but I want them to speak for themselves, and I don't want to be doing that in this case.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Hamilton, you have a question?
No.
Commissioner Coder, have you got a question?
Not right now, Chairman. I'll wait till after we've heard from the applicant.
Commissioner Killeen, have you got a question?
Yes, sir. So Dan, just to be clear, their development plan calls for a park in the complete footprint of where the building is right now, an open kind of landscape space. Is that right?
Well, they have an entryway, and they have a landscape architect here with us today and members of the architecture firm. Can we go back to that slide real quick of the applicant slide that I showed of the site plan of the, keep going. There we go. That's it. So on the upper left to the immediate west of the health sciences building is a driveway into the campus with a curb cut off of Oakland. But largely where the footprint of buildings A and B is now is that green space that you see with those kind of diagonal walking paths through them.
Thank you. No more questions.
Commissioner Richardson, do you have a question? Commissioner Richardson, do you have a mute button? Commissioner Robinson, have you got a question?
No question.
Okay,
Chairman,
who's speaking?
Barbara Burkett.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you ask director? I believe he said he was also going to share some photographs submitted by Mr. Gerstner. Were those submitted, or are those going to be submitted?
Good question.
Let me ask a question of the staff and the host. Is he listed as one of the people to speak today?
What's his name?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. What I had asked was, is Mr. I think it's Gunther, is he? Oh, here we go. He is?
What was his?
Give me one quick second to make sure I'm clarifying the right person. I feel silly, but yes, okay. So is John Gunther one of the speakers?
He is not on my list, no.
He's not on your list. All right. I see Mr. Gunther has a window here. Mr. Chairman, in case Mr. Gunther is not going to speak, what I'd like to do is show his pictures, and I have an idea what Mr. Gunther was getting at in sending these pictures, because I had a phone conversation with him before the meeting today. Shall I share the pictures he sent in and explain?
Yes.
Okay. All right, this is going the very low-tech method on a very high-tech method, but I'm going to hold up the pictures of the buildings. This is a picture of building, I would say it's mostly building, part of building A and part of building B. Can folks see that?
If you want, I can actually share my screen in the email that you sent. Would that be better?
What do we think of that, host?
Chairman Callow?
That sounds good to me.
Okay, let's see if I can. I've never done this before, but in theory, it should work.
I cannot tell you how many things have gone wrong that were preceded by that statement.
Okay, well, here goes. Hold on.
Also, Mr. Gunther.
You're a braver man than I, Randy Vines.
It's not letting me do it. It says someone else is sharing a screen, so it won't let me share it. But
Let's go back to the old-fashioned way of blotting out Dan Krasnoff's face.
okay.
Thank you. I'm going to make it, just to spite you, Richard, I'm going to show my face anyway while I do this. Oh, a little bit, my ear maybe. So this is the picture that one of the pictures he sent in. It shows the health science building, and then the building to the right is buildings A and B. The next photograph is, I had mentioned there's a driveway in the plan. This is a picture of basically a section of building A and B from Oakland Avenue. And I see Mr. Gunther's face looking at me on the screen there. So he's welcome to speak during the public session, but this is another photograph. I can't tell if we're on the Oakland side or the south side, the parking lot side, for lack of a better term. This is a very close up of a section of the of windows. Really amazing brickwork on this building, I have to say.
Dan, are there many more photographs?
I got about 4 or 5 of them.
Okay, Mr. Gunther has signified now in chat that he'll be speaking himself.
Okay,
Okay,
all right,
have you concluded your presentation?
sure, yeah.
Okay. So, question, Bethany, who has signed up to speak?
So far, what I have to speak on this item is Andrew Wiles, Jeff Pittman, Michelle Old, Joel Kirshen, Paul Zink, and Mr. Gunther. If in the chat, they can tell me if they are to speak on this item or if they are representing the applicant.
Are there any people on the phones?
Bethany, are there people on the phones?
Yes, if they would like to speak on this item, if they could state their name, please.
Well,
Is there anyone currently on the phone who's going to speak on this item at some point? Okay,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, if I could,
yes.
the applicant has a PowerPoint presentation.
Uh-huh.
Typically, they go next, yes?
They do. They will.
Okay,
However, we're going to try to get organized first and figure out how much longer we might be here and figure out what order we're going to speak.
sounds like a plan.
Okay, Bethany, who is leading the applicant? Do we know?
I think it's Paul Zink.
The applicant is Paul Zink, and he has signed up to speak.
Okay, let's begin with Mr. Zink.
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Krasnoff and board members. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today about our Forest Park campus for St. Louis Community College. My name is Paul Zink, and I am the Vice Chancellor for Finance and Administration at the college. Many of the names that were read off to wish to speak are sort of part of our presentation. Mr. Krasnoff had received from us a PowerPoint sort of deck. I guess is there a way we could have that on the screen to speak from? There we go. So starting with the first slide that had almost nothing on it, that's mine. I meant a few words, but I did want to, I guess, start right off by answering board member Mr. Vine's question related to the work that's ongoing in the A tower and B tower sections of the building at 5600 Oakland. What we have begun work and in fact completed most of the work in those sections related to environmental abatement, so abatement of the asbestos containing materials and other things. I continue to learn in my job here at the college, and as all of you who are very knowledgeable of mature construction know, there's an awful lot of materials in those buildings that would need to be removed, certainly in the advance of demolition, but in any case, in the advance of whatever we would do with the buildings next. So the college has a policy we've followed for a number of years that prior to undertaking any kind of renovation or anything, that we want to do the best we can to get those hazardous materials out of our buildings. So we hired an environmental firm to do that, and we hired, in fact, a second environmental firm The environmental firm was Advanced Environmental, and the oversight firm was NPN Environmental, to sort of design how we would remove those materials and ensure that they were all done within the various codes, ordinances, statutes, regulations, and so on. And they have also met extensively with the offices of the city and the state, who are responsible for oversight of that. So all of the work that has gone on in those towers to this point has been related to the abatement work that had to go on in those buildings. And I hope, Mr. Vines, that answers your question sufficiently. Certainly, if not, we can address it further. I heard in the letters, and I'm going to speak off my notes, which sometimes isn't such a great idea, but I heard in the letters about, being very thoughtful in our planning. And I think what we'll show to you here through our presentation is that the college put a great deal of very thoughtful planning and thought into the overall project, which we've undertaken at the Forest Park campus. That included a great number of meetings with the public and forums to solicit feedback pertaining to the college's public mission and what we do to prepare the workforce that's needed for our city. We are your community college, and we had public forums and received a great deal of feedback pertaining to the overall project. So we certainly understand the difficult balance of cultural preservation with moving toward the future, as Mr. Krasnoff stated. We have inherited, we know this is part of our makeup, this campus at Forest Park, which is probably one of the most visible pieces of real estate along that very well-traveled corridor in our city. There is currently 890,000 square feet within this entire complex, and the demolition that is proposed of sections A and B of that building really is less than 10% of the overall square footage of the Weiss design structure, and actually is less square footage than the square footage that we put up with our new Center for Nursing and Health Sciences. So I just think those are important things that we thought you would want to know. Again, a great deal of very thoughtful planning had gone into this process. I'd like to introduce our CEO and Chancellor, Dr. Jeff Pittman, and Jeff is going to tell you a little bit, Dr. Pittman will tell you a little bit about our mission here at this campus and why we undertook this project and started this whole process a couple of years ago.
All right, thank you, Paul, and good afternoon, Mr. Chair, board members, Director Krasnoff. I certainly appreciate the time to have this opportunity and get to speak with each of you today, and appreciate you considering our application or permit for the demolition of the AB portions of that particular building on the Forest Park campus. Well, I want to say that I'm incredibly proud of the team that's here today and for all the work they've accomplished to provide this community with a state-of-the-art learning facility for our students and for our employers. As Mr. Zink mentioned, we went through a pretty comprehensive planning process as we began considering what to do with this campus. We received very positive feedback from our community in those preliminary meetings. Since we began building the building and have completed it, we've had incredible support from the state of Missouri, from the city and the county of St. Louis that understand, the rationale and reason for us moving forward with this project. In general, just as a high-level view, I want to point out two key goals that I believe that the team that is on this call today have worked in a very effective manner. The first was to create a plan that has built a modern and world-class learning environment for our students, including a plan to expand the plaza concept of Mr. Kiley on the east end of the property, and simultaneously creating a beautiful front door to the campus. And our architects will get a little more into that detail. We also, the second key goal, we wanted to create an architectural plan for the campus that preserves the original intent of the architects Harry Weiss and Dan Kiley, that we continue to have a modern presence for our students, for our community, and for our employers in this case to serve our allied health programs and our allied health partners, hospitals, and other healthcare facilities. And as you would go through this process, you'll see, or this presentation, you'll see a lot of the planning and thought that went behind it. When looking at this opening slide, yeah, the Center for Nursing and Health Sciences, it really came about after a careful and deliberate study of how we would approach creating modern learning spaces for our students. And we did a very deliberate study and worked hard with architects and examined the current campus that we have. But our conclusion after looking at this for several months was that the current structures were just not flexible enough to allow us to create the learning spaces that are needed to create students in the 21st century in the healthcare environment, which is becoming more and more competitive and complex over time, particularly in light of this pandemic that we're all engulfed in right now. All of our healthcare programs were distributed across this campus. So in addition to having inflexibility with the current space, we could not fit all of the healthcare programs together. So there are a lot of physical barriers between the healthcare programs, which is significant when you want students and programs interacting together to help the students learn and appreciate what each aspect of a hospital or a health center has to deal with. And you can look at these programs, for example, nursing, for example, sonography, radiology is not mentioned on here, respiratory care, paramedic. I mean, all of these programs that you see are what you will find when you go into the hospital or need medical assistance. And I'll get into a little more detail here in a few minutes about the workforce needs that we've encountered since we began working on our strategic plan and then this campus plan. So given what we learned about the Forest Park campus and the inability to really create the kind of learning environment needed for our healthcare employers, we decided to invest $41 million into this project that consists both of the new building that you have seen pictures of and then also complements the architecture of the Forest Park campus. So the programs you see, and moving on here to the next slide, let's go ahead and move on to the next one. So the programs that you saw on the current building occupy, it amounts to about 900 students in nursing and healthcare science professions. There's a tremendous need for all of these programs. Nursing alone is getting to the point where it's frightening. There's an 18% vacancy rate in nurses that equates to about 2,000 positions in St. Louis County. We currently enroll on the campus about 400 students, or in our nursing program about 400 students. We plan to expand that to about 700 students in the not too distant future, just because of the high demand. The building itself, we have three floors completed. We'll be building out the fourth floor in the not too distant future to expand upon those programs that our healthcare partners are telling us they need the most. We've been very successful with our healthcare programs. Currently, we have a 90% job placement rate with our programs. All of our board certified programs, including nursing, have a 90% passage rate on the licensing exam. And I want to be the first to point out that we offer the Associate of Science degree in nursing, and our tuition is only $113 a credit hour, and our RNs sit for the same licensure exam as those students completing a bachelor's degree. So that's pretty significant from a cost perspective and avoiding debt for our students. 80% of our recent grads also will start a BSN, usually within 1 year after graduation, to continue on. So we put them into a really affordable and open access situation. And we have several full-time, as you can see, full-time and part-time faculty that are teaching in that particular program. We recently had some visits from all of our legislators, from city and county folks. They've been very impressed by the building. we've had visits from area hospitals, and I recently had the opportunity to meet with Richard Leikwig. Rich is the CEO of BJC, and he said to me, it kind of set me back, but he said, you basically constructed a mini hospital here. And when I mentioned that the existing structures at Forest Park were inflexible, we really needed a much deeper and wider building that you see here than we have in any other of the building within the Forest Park campus, because they're all very narrow. Because most of the space in the new building is sim labs or simulation labs. We put together several programs that complement each other. And even though there are classrooms in this building, you're mostly in the full-size labs and the simulation labs. And I think the best example I can give you is we have a culminating experience at the end of each year where we basically have an emergency occur. And we literally have a patient fall in a simulated apartment. We place the patient in a simulated ambulance. We triage the patient as we would in the emergency room. We'll take them to radiology or sonography and check other things for them that are needed. Ultimately, the patient will end up in the surgical suite. So it brings the majority of these programs together in a way we simply could not do in the current structures that existed. Next slide, please. Okay, many of you may be aware that every year since I've been here, St. Louis Community College conducts a State of the St. Louis Workforce Report. And through all of these reports, the most alarming statistic we see, and this is based on burning glass technology, real-time workforce needs, the state of Missouri, the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center, healthcare is just a glaring need. We're going to see a growth rate in healthcare jobs approximately 14% compared to about 1% growth rate of all other industries. 38% of healthcare employers cited knowledge and the ability to find skilled workers. So the logic of putting this building together, I hope, begins to make sense to all of you. And the reason that we had to approach it the way that we did in order to meet the needs of our community and our employers. I've already mentioned the vacancy rate for nurses. That's at the really concerning level, as are all of the job postings this last year, 21,000 for all healthcare positions for those programs that we offer. And you can see a couple of other statistics there, but it's basically forcing a lot of our healthcare employers to kind of a scary state. And I can honestly say, for the first time in the last couple of years that I've been to a doctor's office to get a routine exam, there are no RNs present. You'll see other levels of employees, but not the types of employees that you're used to seeing. Okay, next slide. Okay, this time I'm going to turn it over to Joel Kirshen from KAI, but I would just like to say that we recognize the significance of those concerns expressed today. If this permit is approved, we want to honor both Harry Weiss and Dan Colley's contributions, not only in how we plan to move forward, but publicly recognizing them at a high profile point on our campus with signage or plaques. So Joel, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Pittman. My name is Joel Kirshen. I'm with KAI Design. We're the architects on the new Center for Health and Sciences. And so early in the process, we were looking at the existing building, trying to get a feel for what opportunities there were there and how it would or would not fit into some of the demands. As an example there, what I've got on the upper part is the a typical floor layout in the existing building with classrooms along one side, a central spine corridor, and then offices on the other side. Now, below is the floor plan of the new building, and they're at the same scale. And you can see that the depth of some of the simulators, some of the clinic spaces, and are just, it's just significantly different than what was even available in the existing building. And so some of those ratios were just not available, and we didn't, there was just not the opportunity to get the spaces that we needed there. And all right, if you go to the next slide. Compounding that is the looking at the building in section. The existing building has a relatively lower floor-to-floor height, which is accentuated a bit by the fact that it uses a concrete waffle slab structure, which takes up another 2 feet of space, which really starts to limit the vertical space that we have available. And as you can imagine, in the new spaces, the new sim spaces, the clinics, there's much more much more systems that you need to get through and around these spaces. You know, so the denser structure in the existing building limited the amount of space that was available for these support systems. And this is even more apparent when you get into the simulated spaces for the hospital, the ORs, the different radiology rooms. They take up quite a bit more vertical space, and that just was not available in there. All right. If you go to the next slide then. So we started to step back and look at things as a whole, and we were wanting to look at a bigger picture of things and starting a master planning process. And as part of that, we brought Michelle Oley and DTLS Design in. And so I was going to let Michelle take some of this. Sorry, my other video screen's off to the side. So if I look off to the side, I'm looking at her over there. So, so I was going to invite Michelle to step in and start to help walk us through some of that master planning process and some of what we looked at there.
Thanks, Joel. I'm Michelle Oley. I'm a landscape architect and principal at DTLS Landscape Architecture. I see the chat thread lighting up here, so I will try to get through these pretty quickly. But I'm really excited personally to be able to talk to the Preservation Board. Not often is the landscape or the landscape architect the focus of these meetings, and it is a personal honor to get to carry the flag for Dan Kiley. I have actually had the chance previously 4 different times to help revitalize spaces initially designed by Dan Kiley. So please know, as we walked through this process, I took the "What would Dan Kiley do" mantra to heart. And I feel like we, given the constraints around the building, our challenge was to stitch the new building back into the campus in a meaningful and thoughtful way. And so I'd like to explain how we've done that. The slide here before you hopefully is not new. This on the left is the original design competition entry by Wiesen Associates and Dan Kiley Associates. And you can see that the built form is really unchanged to what was pre-construction situation here on the right. The thing that doesn't appear, however, is this monolithic water feature that Kiley had intended for the east end of the campus. East is sort of toward us. It's a fun, we're trying to get the same angle, right? And there's also been future construction on the campus, including the gymnasium and the baseball field and the parking garage in the foreground to the east of the original campus. But really, the challenge that we have had, and Dan set this up so well, is that Dan Kiley Plaza is the star from a pedestrian experience standpoint. But pedestrians are no longer using that space to access the campus in the same way that they were when it was originally constructed. And the challenge the college told us, and all of those original fact-finding missions told us, is that students, visitors, faculty don't know how to access the building. So they're having to circumnavigate the campus, park, and then walk up through, I wish I was joking, loading docks to come up into the campus structure. And that's just not honoring the intent that we understand Weiss and Kiley had when they originally planned that big, beautiful plaza at the entry. Next slide, please. So when undertaking any project, especially one with historic significance, go to the next slide. Sorry. Thank you. We started with a really thorough investigation of existing conditions. Sorry, I'm not seeing it progress. Is everyone else seeing it progress yet? Sorry, thank you so much. On the left here, you see the pre-construction conditions. And then our first step was an analysis of what was really meaningful about that experience from the original site plan and construction. Very obvious to us was the east-west pedestrian spines that Weiss and Kiley have laid out. And so that was a major goal moving forward, was to accentuate those. Another, like I said, desire of the college was to accentuate the north-south and provide a real entry point to the campus off of Oakland. And we also identified very early the importance of that Dan Kiley Plaza as a primary pedestrian circulation space. So on the right here is the master plan vision that we developed. And if you'll progress to the next slide, I've blown that up so it's a little easier to see. This master plan was really a needs assessment. So we undertook to provide an initial vision for sort of longer term build out of this campus. It has not been touched since it was originally built, and so it needed a fresh look. What this does really is preserves the entirety of the East Campus in the historic structure, but allows the western edge, which was never fully realized from the original plans, to be the more contemporary, newer insertion. And in a very faint dashed line there, you can also see where we have planned for potential future construction sites. So thinking about how we can look into the future and help to identify that moving forward. If you would move to the next slide for a little bit of analysis of that. So here you can see how those east-west axes are really being accentuated from off of the Weiss plinth and down through the rest of the campus. And that yellow box is really just saying we acknowledge that the Kiley Plaza is the pedestrian plaza and the new plaza should really be vehicularly focused. This allows us to have a vegetated quad, Mike, to your point earlier, a vegetated quad in the footprint of the A and B towers that will be the organizing structure for this new end of campus, or this eastern end of campus. But really putting the bulk of the focus on an accessible new entry for the college. Just one really quick anecdote. It's really hard. It was really hard to know what was going on in the campus. And so we wanted to put the education on display as a part of this effort. If you'll go to the next slide. The next slide is really a representation of where that master plan ended up for the construction documents phase. We all know that things change from the master plan to the construction documents, so I wanted to just orient you a little bit here. Still present is the north-south axis. The new Center for Nursing is there with the darker roof line. And you can see several iterative, what are sculpture pieces being donated by or loaned by the Gateway Foundation that will be sort of marking the axes from east to west. Also in the front along Oakland, we have given a nod to Kiley's water feature and so focused a lot of our bioretention up on that edge to provide a landscape wink, I guess, to the original Kiley plan that was not developed. If you'll go to the next slide, Dan stole the thunder a little bit, but that's fine. This is an axon of that central quad space that's being formed by the new entry and the new building upon the demolition of the first two pieces of the A and B tower. And it shows those light wall pieces relocated from the Peter Walker Plaza downtown, out of the sort of warehouse that they've been stored at. The next slide shows the newly created front door to the campus. And you can see here the space that Dan was talking about between the remaining C and D tower spaces and the new building, and creating this sort of breadth between the historic campus that is remaining untouched and the new end, or the new interventions. The following slide really does draw a little bit more attention to the vehicular version of the pedestrian plaza, and really accentuates that front water feature. So that's really a bioretention area that's collecting all of the drainage off of the roof of the new tower and adding to the sustainability story for the college. You can see here too that this is not just a vehicular sort of throughway. This is really designed to accentuate that east-west axis and make it a pedestrian-friendly environment, because students are crossing this hopefully all day long. The next slide also just reiterates that front entry story. And here you can see the perspective that you're starting to get of the C and D towers, but also as if you were a vehicle, you would know you were at the college, which was our primary goal there. And then I swear just two more. The next perspective shows you on the north axis, which I think is the less celebrated of the two. There's one axis that follows the north facade of the Weiss buildings, and there's one that follows the south facade. The north facade to me has always been a little bit under accentuated, because the way that the grades worked in the original campus master plan, all of the students and faculty were circulating in the basement, literally the utility spine, because they didn't want to come up out and deal with the grade changes. We had a lot of ADA accessibility issues on this campus. So this is really a way that we are encouraging students and visitors to come up out and experience these pedestrian spines in the way that we think they were originally intended. Also evident here is one of our other little winking acknowledgements of the original design, which are these lovely truncated pediments that mark a rhythm as you walk down the building. And we've followed that same rhythm for the seating elements in the new pedestrian or vehicular plaza, so that we get sort of that nod to the previous limestone pieces. And we've also been working with Gateway Foundation to relocate the Weathered Venus, the Jim Dine sculpture, from the back side of campus to the front side to bring some more recognition. And my last slide there is just a view back from the east looking northwest. So you can really see how we are hoping to separate the historic end of campus from the newly implemented end of campus, and that new entry drive, and really the two east-west axes that we were trying to drive through the campus. And with that, I'll hand it back to Paul Zink.
Thank you, Michelle. And board members, so just in closing, and we'd certainly like to be able to answer any questions or concerns, or provide further information you'd like to hear. Just like to maybe add a couple of things that we hadn't yet covered in our presentation. St. Louis Community College is a public institution funded by taxpayers. So certainly one of our concerns in all of our campuses, especially with this project, is being a good steward of resources. And so as we undertook this project, I think I mentioned earlier, we actually are proposing to demolish less square footage than what we built. But the fact of the matter is that we had looked at several studies related to the demographics of this campus and the population that it serves. And we just don't need the amount of square footage that keeping these buildings would we continue to have, at least in the foreseeable future. And so a lot of the project was sort of, again, balancing what we have to do from a standpoint of moving forward to provide instruction for the 21st century student and an accessible campus and all of those other things we mentioned, but also being good stewards of taxpayer dollars, quite frankly, and also trying to keep costs exceptionally low for our students as we do. So again, just from a standpoint of what we would do with towers A and B now that we've built this new high-tech structure, there's just not an adaptable purpose. It would be very difficult to adapt them for anything really other than general classroom space, and we just don't really believe, based on the demographic information, there's a need for that at this time. With that, again, I'd just like to thank you all for the opportunity for our team to present to you in this most unusual format, and certainly we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Robinson, have you got questions for the applicant?
I do not.
Commissioner Richardson, do you have questions for the applicant?
No.
Commissioner Killeen, have you got questions for the applicant?
No, sir, not at this time.
Alderman Coder, have you got questions for the applicant?
Yes, Chairman, I got a couple questions.
Proceed.
Thank you. I guess my first one was sort of generally for the applicant. Why are you seeking this demolition now and not, I guess, when you were getting your plans approved to build the new building? Why did you wait until the new building was completed before seeking demolition of these structures?
Thank you, Alderman. I appreciate that question. Certainly hindsight would be that we would have asked for a preliminary approval. Yeah, this project, and sort of relating back to my comments about being good stewards of our resources, this project represents the largest building project since we built our major campuses in the 1960s. We just don't do a lot of this sort of thing. And I can only offer that's really, as humbly as I can say, an oversight that we didn't come for a preliminary approval of that idea prior to the construction of the building. Certainly was not in any way ill-intended. And I think our presentation, quite frankly, would have been very much the same as it is today.
Understood. Mr. Zink, you mentioned earlier that you had some public forums, and I know also Dr. Pittman referenced the comprehensive planning process. Could you talk to us a little bit about those public forums, when they occurred, where, what kind of participation you had in that process?
Sure, I'll ask Dr. Pittman if he wants to speak on that. If not, I certainly can.
Sure, Paul, I'd be glad to. So we initially started out with a comprehensive strategic planning process that consisted of 23 community and faculty and staff meetings to assess what the needs are of the community. We often heard about the need to expand many of our career programs, but certainly healthcare continued to rise to the front. After so once the strategic plan was developed, we began looking at all of our campuses in regards to how we can make them more up-to-date and relevant to the workforce as it exists today. And after taking a look at, in particular, the Forest Park campus, which has the most healthcare programs in the district, more than any other campus, we began to look at the feasibility of first trying to renovate space. And as I mentioned earlier, we determined after that study that the space just we weren't able to convert it because it just wasn't flexible enough to be used. Then we held, I believe there were 3 or 4 community forums where we invited people to come in, and we had KAI present and asked them to present around the concept of a new Center for Nursing and Health Science building. Those meetings consisted of community leaders, healthcare officials, the chamber was present often. So I feel we received really good input from our community. We invited all of the hospital CEOs and their staff to be there. So we were getting a lot of good information in terms of what the community wanted and wanted their community college to be more responsive to what they saw as the greatest need in the St. Louis County area.
Thank you, Doctor. And my last question, I guess, if this demolition of buildings A and B was approved, I know Mr. Krasnoff spoke to that buildings, I guess, C, D, and E are not on the table, but what assurances would we have, as a city and looking to preserve historic architecture, that buildings C, D, and E, or in any other remaining buildings of this complex, aren't demolished in the future?
I'll take a stab at that and see if Mr. Zink has any other comments, but we've recently received funding from the state to renovate other parts in C, D, and E. And we have healthcare and science labs in those buildings as well, particularly science labs, more so than healthcare. So we've already, between the college and the state, invested heavily in C, D, and E to keep those spaces up to date and relevant. And they were of this size. The types of labs we need in those buildings were the size that fit into the existing spaces within the building that worked. We will also need to do, and the director pointed this out, we need to really update the other towers. G and F look tired to me is the best way to say it, and are planning to invest additional funds into those structures. So we have a combination of, in my mind, of both worlds, where we have a very modern facility on the campus, indicative of what people see when they go into a hospital. Then we have the existing structure in place that needs to be improved and maintained.
And if I just may add to that answer, Alderman Cutter. So the Chancellor Pittman mentioned the strategic planning process prior to us taking on this project. So simultaneously to this project being planned, we were also looking at all of our existing facilities to see what we could do with the existing facilities to improve them, to sort of answer the question of educating the 21st century student. We've proceeded with an awful lot of work along those lines throughout the other towers of the campus, through C through G Tower, and also throughout the process of moving into the new Center for Nursing and Health Sciences, realized we had so many of these health programs that were in various locations across the almost 900,000 square feet of that campus, those buildings. And so we had to move. We also had spaces in A Tower and B Tower that we had to move into the remaining parts of the structure. So we really have kind of made a commitment that, as again, we're very thoughtful of being good stewards of community resources, of the dollars that we're entrusted with. We had to make a commitment that we were going to both renovate, but also hold on to the rest of the buildings to support our students into the future.
Thank you guys for that. Chairman, nothing further.
Thank you. Commissioner Hamilton, question?
No.
Commissioner Vines, question?
Yes. Thank you so much for your presentation, and I do applaud your investment in the campus. The one thing that keeps kind of bothering me a little bit is the fact that it looks like that these buildings are under full demolition. To me, it looks like the intent is to demolish these buildings, and even if it's just a remediation, the windows are not secure. They're open to the elements, which is, I believe that there's a building code against that. And it looks like this was kind of a foregone conclusion. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Hi, I'll be happy to, Mr. Vines. And again, thank you for the question. So as I mentioned, when we undertook the abatement of those portions of our eastern wing structure, A and B Tower, we had an environmental consultant, NPN, put together a plan for how we would do that. All of the windows in that building, and just as an editorial aside, there were not a lot of windows in that building, but certainly the ones that were there they had identified in the asbestos survey the glazing and caulking of the windows as being asbestos containing materials. So in order for us to meet our objective of trying to abate and remove as much of those materials as we can during any renovation, and I think I mentioned earlier that's been a long time goal of the college. That's the reason that the window, along with their frames, had been removed. They had been removed as whole units, and and controlled disposal of those as they were asbestos containing. So we just felt there was not a whole lot of choice in that matter. And again, the college, with our commitment, did not want to do that in a, I should say, halfway manner, but wanted to make sure that we did the right thing with those very hazardous materials.
Thank you. I guess you would agree that if demolition is not approved for these buildings as requested, that the remediation work that you're doing there could also bring us a little bit closer to maybe a reuse of these existing buildings. Is that correct too?
Well, they certainly could. Again, it's hard for us to foresee with the data that we have and the programs that we teach at that campus, especially with the new building being there, that we would have purpose to do that. And so I would just caveat with that. Probably the next most important project to us on that particular campus is the 4th floor of the Center for Nursing and Health Sciences, because we do have expansion space there to expand those very high-tech programs and very important programs that we're providing for the community. But to directly answer your question, of course, if they're fully abated, some kind of reuse would be easier. It's just a matter of, does that fiscally make sense for us to do, given the very many challenges we have on that front.
Okay, understood. 2 really quick questions, final. You do have a permit to do the work that's being done currently on the buildings?
Yes, sir, we do.
Okay. And then the next one is the question was asked by Alderman Coder earlier, that the other buildings of the same vintage are slated to be preserved and reused, and you're making an investment in their reuse potential and upgrading them. Is there a reason why the determination was made that those buildings would be suitable for reinvestment, but not these 2?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that and see if the chancellor wants to as well. I think we had made reference to earlier, as far as even the science labs, the biology and chemistry labs that we moved within the other towers, or that remain in the other towers, just don't require really that same sort of wide space that these health programs in there, in the aggregate sort of required. And the old buildings, the existing structures, I should say, we can create classroom space in those buildings. That's relatively easy for us to do, but it's really these sort of larger, high-tech spaces that are really needed to teach today's students that we just didn't have space for. So by moving the health programs out of those, the remaining pieces of the structure, sections of the structure, we believe that we have certainly enough space in there to be able to provide all of those other spaces that we can adapt within the current structure.
One thing I would add, Commissioner Vines, is that just the ceiling height is a limitation in the older structures. If you were to walk into the operating room and the huge boom that's overhead, and in some of the other, for example, in the dental hygienist clinic, you quickly begin to see the significance of height of ceilings for these programs.
And that is not a hindrance in the other buildings of the same that were built at the same time, that you're not proposing
with the current, yes, excuse me, sir, I'm sorry. With the programs that we have now, it is not. That's why we've been investing in CD&E and other aspects of the campus, because that space is suitable for the types of programs that we have in them. Many of them are just general education classes, or such as science, math, language arts, that don't require any specific heights or widths or depth. much that's needed in a healthcare environment.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I mean, before I concede my place here, Chairman Callow, did we figure out whether the phones are working right now? Because I know there were some people who were mentioned when you did the call on the phone that were not able to hear.
They're not able to hear, or we're not able to hear them?
Either or. There, for some reason, they were listed as being on the phone and wanting to speak, but they were not able to be heard.
Well, certainly so far, the moment for them to speak has not happened.
Oh, okay.
If they can't hear, that's a different subject.
Okay.
You know which one it is?
I mean, yeah, I know Andrew Weil was on the phone for a while, but I have no idea. You know, he was trying to say something, but I don't know if that was.
Well, good. He'll get his chance to say something when I say his name.
Okay.
I'll say, Andrew Weil, are you ready to talk? And then he'll be unmuted. How about that?
Okay, sounds great.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Bethany, now is the moment. What sort of a list have we got?
The only one that I have on the list is Andrew Weil.
Okay, Andrew Weil, this is your moment.
This is my moment?
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
There would have been more moments, but Mr. Zink took many of them.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a long call, and my phone very well may cut out because of the length of the call, and I'm actually calling in from rural Missouri on a house phone with a battery that's running very low. But I appreciate the opportunity, and I thank everyone for the presentation so far. And I obviously understand and believe that everyone is here with the best intentions and trying to do the best thing for St. Louis Community College at Forest Park. So we'll get that out of the way, and then also say that I believe that Director Krasnoff has done a very fair and equitable job of presenting this project, and has been very helpful in his communication. I guess I would just, my primary point here is not that this is necessarily the wrong direction. My primary point is that I don't think that the public has had full access to the ability to participate in this conversation. And that's not any one of the people on this call's fault. It's just the circumstance. And I think that with a decision of this magnitude that has a significant impact on identified high merit, architecturally significant components of St. Louis's cultural heritage, that the public should be given the opportunity to have a full access to commenting on it. And the reason these buildings have been identified as high merit, aside from the fact that they are, is that the city expended public dollars on a mid-century modern architectural survey that was designed to identify the buildings that we should be careful of, and the landscapes and the context that we should be careful of. And they also got a grant from the State Historic Preservation Office through the Historic Preservation Fund to hire a consultant at, frankly, significant expense to identify the buildings and the landscapes and the mid-century stuff that we have, that we don't have very much of it. But what we do have, the city leadership decided that it was worth looking into it and identifying it and trying to protect it. And these were buildings that were identified by that. So basically we have public money that was expended to build these buildings in the first place. We're going to have public money that's been expended to demolish these buildings. We've had public money that's been expended to identify these buildings as significant. And to me, it's just this sort of weird circular thing. And yet, with all of this public money that's sort of tornadoing around this process, very few people are in a position to participate in the democratic process of discussing this. So, you know, all of us have been on the phone for a very long time. I understand that. I'm sympathetic to that. But very few people who would perhaps be interested in weighing in on this. And I should retract perhaps, because I know of a lot of people that would really like to be participating in this, but because they are literally under order by the governor and the mayor and the county commissioner, that they can't go out and they can't participate in the public meeting. And some of them might not have the necessary technology. I know I don't at the very moment because of the virtue of where I am. I just feel like a decision of this import needs to have better public access, and I don't think that that's really what we've got going on right now. And I would just add one further point. I'm sorry, but students of history in St. Louis will understand that in the mid-20th century, the Victorian architecture of St. Louis was regarded as obsolete and was regarded as gaudy and was regarded as something that, you know, we'll never need again, we'll never want again. And ironically, the modernists and the modernist influence resulted in the destruction of so much of our historic architecture. And now we really lament that. And we have so very little mid-century architecture, important mid-century architecture in the city of St. Louis, that I think that history will reflect poorly, will look poorly upon us if we discard these components without due process and in exchange for green space, no matter how conscientiously that green space may have been designed. So those are my comments, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or interrogations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John Gunther, are you still here?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, the fact that John isn't here anymore kind of makes my point, because he feels very, very strongly about this, and he's a fellow of the American Institute of Architects and an esteemed colleague.
Unmute me. I'm trying to get unmuted.
You are?
I'm unmuted by the host. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I thank you very much, and I would like to echo Andrew's comments and reinforce them. And I do thank you very much for this presentation. It's been very enlightening today. I submitted that letter on behalf of our board of directors for the Society of Architectural Historians, St. Louis and Missouri Valley chapters. And I would say that we will again express our grave concerns over the potential loss of these two buildings, even after hearing this report today, this presentation. I totally understand and am sympathetic to balancing the needs of the 21st century classrooms and education with the preservation of these of this now 50-year-old historic structure, a magnificent example of modern architecture. I find it of interest, though, that the 50-year-old original building is now suggested that it's crowding out the campus because of the placement of the new building. I think that as one looks at adding on and expanding campuses, and if one appreciates the original campus master plan. And by the way, I would also add Ronald Schmidt, who was one of a couple of people who worked on this project originally, also wrote the book on the architecture of Forest Park Community College in 2009. And he points out in his letter to the board very, very significantly the organizing ideas, the efficiency that it was thought about. It was a role model for community colleges all over the country. They would come here to see what we did here in St. Louis. It was a big deal in those days. So please enter his comments into the record as well, if you would. But as one thinks about how to grow a campus logically, you start with the context of it and the scale of the buildings. And Cynthia Weiss has pointed out in her letter that it was very carefully studied to be in relationship to the scale of Forest Park, the highway, and this very long site that they had. So understanding the principles of the original composition is important. I've heard talk of it's a large campus. I've heard talk of honoring Harry Weiss and Dan Kiley. And I truly believe that the best way we can honor both of their legacies is to preserve their buildings and their landscape and actually to realize the landscape that was proposed. So it's been pointed out that not too much square footage has been lost with the demolition of these two buildings. Why not mothball them? Why not leave them? We can't foresee the future. As we all know today, we're living through very strange times, but it could be these buildings can be brought back to life. I'm convinced that they can. And as you point out with the renovations of C, D, E, G, and F, very much they could still be of use. Maybe not now, but maybe mothball them and hold them. And because once lost, they're gone forever. And they are. And we studied the massing of this building complex in great detail, properly balanced. You don't cut off part of a great painting, just because you don't think you need it that much anymore. So keep the entire composition together to the best that you can. Keep it intact. Don't lose it. I lament the fact that that beautiful lawn and courtyard with that large pool was never realized. And I couldn't help but notice, in the comments about a whole new front door off of Oakland Avenue, I kept thinking, what if you could have realized and honored Dan Kiley's legacy by actually creating that pool of water, drive right past it, right past the athletic facility, back towards the center of the campus. Wouldn't that have been great? Wouldn't that have been a knockout entry arrival experience? So there's ways to do these things, but I would say we are where we are. The building is there. I understand why you needed it in terms of width and depth and height and so on and so forth. That's great. And thank you for the education that you're providing our students. I would just say, don't, because that's been built there, don't criticize the original for crowding it out. That was a conscious decision that was made going forward. So please leave the original, please honor Harry Weiss, honor Dan Kiley with whatever you can with the landscape there to regrow that. And please take the long view and please be good stewards of our resources. In this day and age, in sustainable design, we just don't throw away these buildings. And there's embodied energy and carbon that's involved with these two buildings. We're basically just taking all of this incredible building and discarding it to the trash pile. And that's just unconscionable. So please find it in your hearts to keep this building, honor Weiss's legacy by leaving it intact, and find a new use for it at some point in the future. It's great that you have your new building, wonderful. Let's go forward, but let's honor our past truly by keeping this incredible resource that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else in telephone limbo who wants to speak on this subject?
Is it too late for me to say anything? This is Esley Hamilton.
No, it is not, Esley. Go ahead.
I noticed in the presentations that the college made, they said almost nothing about why the building had to be in this location. This campus has acres of parking that could have been adapted for a site for this building without putting it in front of the formal facade that was so carefully designed for it 50 years ago. And of course, everybody's going to say we need all that parking, but you've already built one parking garage. You could have built another one in tandem with this building and had it in some other part of the property that you own. So I don't see that as an argument. Also, I think it's disingenuous to say that this is somehow compatible with the architecture of the present building. This is a kind of a collection of modern cliches and fads, especially the gray and black, that in 10 years are going to be looked on with embarrassment. And so the outside of the building, regardless of all the wonderful features it has on the inside, could have been much better designed to harmonize with the existing buildings if you really intend to keep them. And that brings me to my last question. Dan said these buildings are being preserved. They're not being preserved. They just haven't been torn down yet. The only way they'll be preserved is if you designate this a city landmark. And I think that if you do vote to tear down towers A and B, a condition of that should be that the campus would agree to being designated a city landmark. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley. Is there anybody else out there? Excellent. Commissioners, this concludes the testimony on this subject. Commissioner Vines, have you got a motion?
I guess I do. I move to oppose demolition of these buildings on the basis that I don't believe this is really a valid public forum in which to scrutinize the plans. And I feel like this, you know, in lieu of being tabled, I think that this is a premature decision. So I don't know if that's a formal motion or not, and I will pass to someone else if they have one.
Barb, is there enough there to be a motion, or is it just a mo?
Well, I believe the crux of Mr. Vine's motion was to oppose the demolition of the buildings as the subject of this agenda item.
Does that summarize it correctly, Randy?
It certainly does.
Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Discussion now, Commissioner Vines, your reasoning.
You know, just to rehash the points that have been made by Esley Hamilton, Andrew Weil, and others, I feel like this is not really the proper forum in which to kind of debate this item, given the fact that it's a high merit building and that is not in dispute. This deserves some very serious consideration, and I don't think that this is the proper venue in which to debate that, at the very least. And I also have a lot of questions out there. I feel like there's a very arbitrary designation of which building can stay, which building can go, and I don't feel any assurances that the other buildings that were built in the same time frame as these in question have any added protections whatsoever. I feel like these are all expendable, disposable buildings based on the presentations made. As much as I love to see the investment and the advancements made, I feel like this would be a premature action to take right now under the circumstances.
Commissioner Robinson, a comment?
Yeah, I am probably in agreement with that.
Okay, make some kind of a sign that either you're still talking or that you've walked away.
Can you not hear me? Interesting.
Are you?
I hear him.
There you are. Are you
It's fine.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there with you, Richard. I even attempted to start video, but can you hear me okay now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And see you.
And see me. Beautiful. No, I was saying that I am mostly in agreement with Commissioner Vine.
Commissioner Richardson, a comment, question, point? Commissioner Killeen, comment?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I thank everyone for their thoughtful presentations and the comments from the presenters as well. I think the design of the building and the site were done in a very thoughtful way. I think both firms, the new building did a nice job analyzing the historic nature of the site and coming up with a good solution. I think it's just a shame, though, that the cart was put before the horse here. And we didn't talk about this before that building went up, because it's clear that the intention all along was to eliminate that building, the old building, because the new building replaced it and made it obsolete. So, however, I think it's a bad precedent, actually, that an applicant would do this. However, here we are. I also respect the comment that was made about, well, why didn't we put this new building back in the parking lot? Well, we all know these colleges are trying to get students to come there, and it's a highly visible location where they put that new building. Everybody sees it, and it makes the campus look fresh and new. So I can understand why that was put there. So although I would love to preserve these old buildings, it just appears like the ship has already sailed. They don't need these older buildings. The campus would work much better now without them, that this new building has been built. So I would probably not vote for this motion unless a stronger argument came up from another.
Alderman Coder?
Thank you, Chairman. I've had a change of scenery here. I had to move inside. I was getting cold. I'm going to vote.
Bird, Jack.
The birds was me. I must confess, everybody. I believe that was on my end. I want to speak first to, I guess, the forum we have today, which is Zoom, and I know we got a number of people who voted or who wrote in saying, we shouldn't be having this. We shouldn't be making difficult decisions via Zoom. It's not enough people can participate. Mr. Weil echoed those comments. Mr. Vines included them in his motion. I think I could say pretty candidly, no one wants to be doing this. No one wishes to be making important decisions from our living rooms without being with our fellow board members, being with the general public. But this is the reality right now, and it is imperative that government continues to function. And we have a number of local boards in the city that are making very difficult, hard decisions via teleconferencing, and this is one of them. I think it's a bit of a cop-out to say we're going to postpone this or not take any action simply because we're meeting electronically. And I'm prepared today to make a vote and make a hard vote. I would echo what Mr. Killeen said on the substance of this proposal, that I wish this had been part of a larger proposal. Seeing the plans for the new building in conjunction with a permit to demolish the building. And I think the community college sort of said that, they wish they had approached it that way, but they didn't. And here we are. And I'm not prepared to, as a member of this committee, a new member, tell this institution that's trying to train healthcare workers for the future how best to do that. They don't believe this building meets their needs for what they're trying to do now. They have a new building that does. They want to incorporate this space into their new plans while preserving much of Mr. Weiss's architecture in the remaining portions of the building. And I think that's a good compromise. So I'm going to vote against Mr. Vines's motion and vote in favor of the demolition.
Commissioner Hamilton? Comment, question?
Nope.
Richard,
I second the motion, so that's how I'm voting right now.
Richard, this is David Richardson. I was having trouble with my mic. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Can I say a few words?
Absolutely.
I think I'm in the same. I've heard everything. I just couldn't talk. I agree with Alderman Coder and Commissioner Clean that I think I'm not happy with the process that where we've ended up here today. That this has been out there since 2017. That the college wanted to demolish these buildings. There's renderings online that show the new road coming through and these buildings gone in 2017. And I'm disappointed that no one ever told the college, or the college didn't investigate, or KAI didn't tell them, or no one researched, hey, that as part of the planning of this new building, just like you would research zoning or anything else, that you would realize that you're in a preservation review district, and that you would want to, and if your goal was to have two buildings torn down, that you would probably not put the cart before the horse, and that you would get the approval for the demolition of buildings at the outset, not after the fact. And so I have trouble with the process. I also have trouble with the fact that they're in there doing abatement right now and have the windows out. But having said all that, I end up in the same place as Alderman Coder and Commissioner Clean, in that we're at where we're at. I thought the presentation by the landscape architect was really enlightening. And the comment that she said, you have to go through a loading dock to kind of get on campus. Well, I'm familiar with that because my kids all took their ACT and SAT subject tests here. And I remember parking in the parking lot and wandering through a loading dock in building G to get up to where my kid was going to be. And it's, again, if you're a student there, it's not the most inviting campus, in my humble opinion. And that the plans that they showed for the future of it, I think, do improve probably the experience for the students. And so again, if this was presented back in 2017, before they started construction of the building, we probably could have worked with them to come up with a good solution for their future needs and the needs of the health science education. And as Mr. Hamilton said, they do have acres of parking. We probably could have worked on siting that building back there. But I think, the plan that they did come up with, that they showed, if they carry through with that, will be an improvement for the students and the experience. And I'm all about making sure institutions survive and are preserved. And so I do want the college to thrive and do well. I wrote down here that I thought I'd want as conditions to any motion to allow demolition that, at a minimum, like the end cap of building C would be approved by Dan, because the renderings show that new construction there. I don't know what Dan's thoughts are on that capping off building C. If he's had a chance to look at that design, if the renderings that they showed is what the final is or not. And then also the alteration of other buildings. And I liked Mr. Hamilton's idea. I hadn't thought of it, that maybe there's a condition that they pursue city landmark status, so that those future alterations down the road, whether they be in the immediate future or longer term, get reviewed by this board. And if that's not an appropriate condition, if our council says that, then I don't think I'd really be in favor of this demolition. But if we could make those conditions or have that commitment, I think I'm in favor of it. But the current motion, I'm not. One last point, I believe that Alderman Coder is exactly right. We're all, it might not be an ideal venue or forum to have this, and as evidenced by me having trouble with my mic, but I mean, we're all dealing, with the situation, and government has to go on, and we all have to go on. And so, I don't think it's appropriate to table this or deny this based on the fact that we're conducting it via Zoom. And that's all I have to say.
May I make an amended motion, actually? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, you know, I think Commissioner Richardson made some really valid points, and I think that if there is a way to amend my motion so that the plans set forth today could move forward with the condition that buildings, sorry to not.
Let me stop you for 1 second, Randy. Tiffany, you were the second. Is it okay to proceed with an amended motion? Or do you want to hear the amendment first?
I want to hear what his amendment is.
Okay, proceed, Randy.
Okay. And forgive me because I don't have the documents right here in front of me, but to cite the actual buildings. But I would be willing to, allow these plans to move forward as proposed, as long as we can ensure the protection of the existing buildings. I guess C and G, was that, Dan, am I correct on that?
So the buildings immediately adjacent to this are, I'll work on my alphabet here, B and C, and then the rest of the buildings go up to G. No, E and D. See, I knew I'd fail the alphabet.
I mean, to me, honestly, I would make this really easy. I would say that if we could make a commitment to preserve the rest of the campus as constructed, as designed, envisioned, and any footprint of new development would have to align with that, I'd be okay with this.
Oh, Randy, how do we bind somebody in perpetuity, never change a building?
Okay, fair enough. But I'm a pragmatist, so I would say if you move forward with this as proposed, if there's a way to put a condition where the existing buildings of the same vintage could be preserved, and that language could be embedded in this motion, that would be great.
Well, let me ask you a different question.
Mm-hmm.
What if we vote on your motion as phrased and seconded? If it fails, make a new motion.
Sure, we could do that.
Okay, Barb Burkett, what does a yes vote mean? What does a no vote mean?
Let's see, the motion is to deny the demolition of the building. So voting to deny the demolition would be a yes vote. That's the way I'm reading this? And a motion to oppose the motion would be a motion to allow the demolition.
Sounds good to me.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. This is Alderman Coder. Just to be clear, we're voting on Mr. Vines' original motion, not his brief foray into an amendment, correct?
Chairman, that's my
Yes, that is correct. I was nodding my head up and down yes, but of course my head is not visible. Okay, Barb Burkett.
Yes.
If this motion passes, is there an appeal?
If the motion passes and the demolition is denied pursuant to our code in section 24.40.0460, this initial decision of the board with respect to this demolition application may be appealed, and it would be heard on appeal to the preservation board.
Okay, that would be us.
Yes, it would.
Okay. Commissioners, are you ready to vote?
Yes.
And please, may I ask if Dan would like, the Director Krasnoff, if he'd like to add anything to that, to my response about that process, please ask him. This would be the time to do that.
Commissioner Krasnoff, is there anything you'd like to add to Barb Burkett's legal interpretation?
Nope. The appeal, if this is denied, is back to the board. And that's just as simple as it gets.
Okay. Commissioners, are you clear on the on the motion? If so, we will vote. Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no? I don't think this is an audio problem. I think this is actually a Tony problem. Can anybody see Tony on their screen? Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Colleen, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Coder, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
I'm sorry, what did you say? What was that word?
Mine was yes.
Yours was yes. Okay, Commissioner Robinson, where are you?
Okay, so I had some technical difficulties and phone died, so I had to get it rebooted. So I've probably missed the last 2 minutes.
Okay, let me recap. There is a motion on the floor to deny the demo application. It is seconded by Commissioner Hamilton.
Yep, got that.
The votes are Richardson, no, Colleen, no, Coder, no, Hamilton, yes, Vines, yes, and I've called your name twice.
Ah, okay. No.
That is 4 noes, 2 yeses. The motion fails. Commissioner Vines, would you like to make another motion?
I do. I would like to make a new motion that we allow the demolition to move forward as proposed on the condition that we can establish landmark status for the remaining portion of the campus as designated in the ordinance.
Chairman, this is Barbara Burkett. May I ask, earlier in the discussion, someone said with someone said their desire for the applicant to agree to that. Do you think it would be prudent to ask the applicant if they would agree to that? You raised your issues about binding someone in perpetuity, but perhaps if this is an agreement, it's just a thought.
Well, you know, and I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an orator, but I do believe that there should be some protections for the existing buildings that are not currently threatened, that may very well be threatened in the future, near or far, in allowing this demolition. I feel like this is a slippery slope and this is going to be a precedent as we move forward. And if 1 building or 2 buildings are deemed obsolete for current uses, there is no protection or assurance the other buildings built at the same time will not suffer the same fate. And I feel like there needs to be a way to protect those buildings. And that way it's a win-win for everybody, where we have a campus that is, you know, still in keeping with the vision of the original designers, and also accomplishes the same goals of the current steward.
Let me try this a different way in the hope that we can complete this discussion in this calendar day. Alderman Coder, have you got a motion?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Chairman, I could have a motion. I move that the Preservation Board grant approval of the demolition of the buildings based upon the D and G criteria, with the, I guess, restriction that the community college seek landmark status for the remaining buildings C, D, E, F, and G, if there are an F and G
There are.
buildings. Okay.
To clarify before I ask for a second, will they have to do this before they're issued a demo permit?
I don't care if they do it before they get a demo permit.
Once they
Say
get a
yes
demo
if it's still my
Yes,
motion.
let's say yes. Let's say yes.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Discussion.
Can I ask for this is Richardson, I would offer a friendly amendment to that because again, the college itself can't cause the landmark status. We have to act on it and then the Board of Aldermen has to pass it. So it's not really in our purview, it's really in Coder's other life that ultimately gets to decide it. So I would add to the motion that, and then in the meantime, that they also enter into a binding agreement with the Preservation Board that they agree to consult with the Cultural Resource Office regarding and present to the board for approval all exterior alterations to the other high merit portions of the campus.
I'd certainly accept that friendly amendment to my motion.
I would too.
Okay. Barb Burkett, do you have that?
I believe I do enter, that they would enter into an agreement that they, being the college, consult with cultural resources staff regarding, Mr. Richardson, could you state that again regarding?
Consult with the CRO office regarding any exterior alterations and present those alterations to the board for approval with respect to the other high merit portions of the campus.
Okay.
Barb,
Is
do you think?
that replacing the language about the landmark status?
It's in addition to that. So since we can't control landmark status, it would be in addition to it.
Just as a courtesy, Dr. Pittman, do you understand the motion?
I believe my CFO has a question. Paul, any questions? I think I believe I understand the intent of the question and certainly agree with that. I'll see if Paul has any technical questions for you.
Mr. Sink?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Pittman and Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, I guess maybe I restate this to make sure I have an understanding. So the motion is that the college will pursue the landmark status with the city, which goes through the Preservation Board to the Board of Aldermen for the remaining parts of the structure, that is towers C through G. And also, until that is granted or not, the college will consult with this board prior to making any exterior changes to towers C through G. Is that correct?
Consult with it and get approval from other exterior alterations.
Understood. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
and to clarify that the university or that the college will not object to any landmark status designation that may or may not be deemed by this body.
What?
That's
no.
correct.
What? In English.
Well,
what are you trying to do?
well, I mean, the university or the college will not object to any landmark status that may be designated to these buildings under the procedures that we're conditioning.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Vines, if I understand the question correctly, that if we were to achieve this status, we would not object to it.
Correct. That's
No.
Okay. Are we reasonably clear on what we're voting about? Good enough. Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
And Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
The ayes have it. Thank you all very much.
We thank you.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you. You know, we should have made the landscape architect promise to put in big trees.
I will just add, we only took out 2 of Kylie's originals, so we preserved as many trees as we could.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, commissioners. You want to take a break, or do you want to go on to our appeals?
Go on.
Okay, it is unanimous.
Power through.
Okay. Okay, we will now reconvene to hear appeals of denials. I will, changing the format just a little bit, ask everyone who testifies to affirm that the testimony they're going to give is the truth. Is that clear? Okay, thank you. Calling up the first appeal, 2826 Victor.
My name is Bethany Moore, Cultural Resources, and I'm here to tell the truth. Okay, 2826 Victor Street is an appeal of the director's denial to retain vinyl windows that were replaced without a permit and not done according to a previously approved permit. I would also like to read into the record Ordinance 64689, which is our enabling ordinance, Ordinance 66098, which are the Fox Park standards. The PowerPoint, this presentation, the agenda, and the packet of information that was submitted by the applicant, and all of that information can be found on our website under Preservation Board Exhibits. All right, first picture, please. Okay, this is 2826 Victor Street. A little bit of background on this property. We had a violation called in, and I went out and placed a work order on this property March 5th of 2020. And I asked to speak with the owner about the permit. I was shown a permit from 2018 that showed replacement of all windows to be wood. The windows have all been replaced with vinyl on all sides. Vinyl in Fox Park is allowable on the sides and the rear, but not on the front. Next slide. This is where 2826 Victor is. It's about midway through the block. Next. Here's an example looking directly across the street on Victor. The surrounding houses are of similar age and size to 2826. Next. This is an elevation drawing of the type of the 2 windows that are on the first floor on the primary facade of Victor. This window is arched on the outside, and then it has a square interior. So these windows on the front, not only was the front replaced with vinyl, which is not allowable material for replacement windows in Fox Park on the primary facade, only wood and aluminum, color finished aluminum are allowed, but also this type of window is not replicated in the replacement on the 2 in the front on the first floor. Next picture. This is a picture from the interior showing that this is that type of window. Next picture. Here is a picture from the outside showing what windows were put into the arched window opening. So they are vinyl, and then they are also not windows that fit the opening. They do not have the arch top sash. Next. These are some pictures, 2 houses down, of windows that do fit in the opening correctly. So this is what those windows should look like. It's similar to those. Next. Can you go back to do the elevation? Yeah, that was it. That was it. Okay. So with that being said, I did just want to read a little bit from the standards. So again, all of the windows on this building were replaced not according to the 2008 permit, which stated that they would be wood replacements. All windows on all sides were replaced with vinyl. In Fox Park, we are able to approve the vinyl windows on the sides and the rear, but not on the front, as the standards state that replacement windows or sashes shall be made of wood or finished aluminum. And then also, the profiles of muntin, sashes, frames, and moldings shall match the original elements in dimension and configuration. And those two windows on the first floor do not meet that. They were not replaced with arched windows to fit the arched opening and replicate the original arched window. With that being said, it does not comply with the standards. And based on these preliminary findings, the Cultural Resources Office recommends that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial to retain the vinyl windows on the primary facade, replaced in violation of their approved permit as they do not comply with Fox Park Historic District standards.
Thank you. Question, Commissioner Robinson?
No.
Question, Commissioner Richardson?
No question.
Question, Commissioner Killeen?
No, sir.
Question, Alderman Coder?
Just one question, and I don't know if Bethany has this information handy, but do we have any idea, and maybe this is more for the applicant, how many properties this entity, Invest and Smile, or Mr. Goffney have rehabbed in the city of St. Louis in the past?
I do not have that information, but he is on the call. He will be speaking, so that's a better question for him.
All right, I'll ask him that. I see him there waiting.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Nothing further.
Commissioner Hamilton, a question?
No.
Commissioner Vines, a question?
No.
Sorry, thank you very much. Let's hear from the appellant.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Tell us your name, please.
My name is Yair Gafni.
And your address?
The address of the property is 2826 Victor.
Where can we find you again?
I'm not from this country. I'm from Israel. But I'm an American citizen. Right now, I'm in Tower Grove.
And is your testimony going to be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Proceed.
Okay, so first thing, good evening already, everyone. I am basically going right now to speak about the property at Victor, but first I'll address the question that he asked. I'm not sure who asked that. I have finished rehabbing 4 projects here in the past in the city, also one outside of the city. And when I go and rehab a property, what I'm looking for is basically to create the best place for the new home buyer. Of course, going by code, I could tell you that I also got emails from neighbors in the past on different properties saying thank you for building those type of homes. So since I don't live here and I live in Israel, I was born in the US, but I don't live here. I hired a project manager that basically he was in charge. You also saw the file. He was in charge of everything, following all the permits, making sure everything's going in the right way it's going since I'm a few thousand miles away. And of course, I also hired the JC to do the work since working with specific vendors is complicated when you're a few thousand miles away. So out of my goal to make it the best place, I hired a really good project manager, what I thought back then, and a good contractor. Now the contractor, we started 2018. If you're familiar with flipping houses, even if it's a gut rehab, it's supposed to take maybe a few months. I'm there, as you can see, almost 2 years. So the general contractor breached the contract and left me with a damage, stole money and left me with a damage of $150,000. Now, basically, that money, it's not that I have, extra money. I'm also representing investors over here. And all that money is damage out of my pocket. That's from him. That's the guy who installed the windows. In addition to that, I brought someone else that also did a huge damage and breached the contract. And when I basically realized that the project manager is not doing his work that I paid him for, first I had to reach out to the lender and tell him, listen, I'm out of money. I don't have any more money. Please let me finish this. That way I can at least give some of the money back to the investors. My personal money, I lost. But when I realized it's going to be that difficult, I just basically packed my suitcase, left my job in Israel, left my house, left everything, and came here to St. Louis to basically deal with everything up front when I'm here. So when I got here, I understood the problem. Bethany, if you could please put the first picture that you put, that you could see the front of the house. Thank you very much, I appreciate that. So when I got here, I basically, first thing, I fired the project manager. Contractors, of course, I was starting to look for new ones. I tried at least, to sue some money back. I couldn't because I don't have the money to use an attorney. And I started to make sure that whatever is going from now and on, you could also ask Bethany. I contacted her a few times to make sure that, I'm not a project manager. So I told her, listen, I'm not from this country. I'm not from the state. Let me know I'm doing the right things. So that's why I left everything at home and I came here to take care of that. After that, I tried maybe seeing if I could do anything with the project manager, maybe fixing anything. There's no one really to talk to. Like I said, I don't have the money to pay lawyers to sue those people. I lost all my money. The only thing I'm trying to do now is basically finish a project. The lender won't give me any more money, since I asked them already a few times for more money. And at the same time, I want the people in that neighborhood to be happy with the new neighbors I have, and of course with the new house on the street, and have a great communication with the neighbors over there. So as you can see in the front, if you could look at the two windows and the first floor, if you don't take a picture all the way at the bottom of the window, which most people don't do that when they walk up front of a property, they just look from the side. Those are arched windows basically when you look from the outside. Again, I'm trying to work with what there is. The people who screwed me up did make a mistake. Like I said, I also lost all my money from that. But if you just walk from the street, you can see that those are arched windows from the outside. That's how it looks pretty good. There is, if you look above the sticker, there's a piece of wood over there. I'll take that wood off. That way, you can't see you can go back. Yeah, exactly. So that top wood, I'll take that top wood off. That way, if someone looks from the outside, like I said, I want it to look historic. That's why I'm continuing to contact Bethany to make sure I'm doing the right things. So I'll take that top wood off. That way, when someone walks through, it will look like it's historic. I don't have the funds. I sent you my statements. I have no money. I don't have the funds to do the whole project, which is changing all the 7 windows, even the top 2 and the 3rd floor that you can't see, is more than $5,700. I do not have those funds. In addition to that, I would like to share with you a screen. Let's see if I can share that. Like I said, I want the place to be historic and looking good for the neighborhood. You cannot start screen share. Well, I don't know why I can't start that, but I can't start it, so I'll just tell it to you. I walked through that street, not different streets, Victor Street. Right next to my house, there are a few vinyl windows, and I'm not coming to say anything about those people. I'm just saying the fact is that I'm not bothering, or I'm not like outstanding. I think they're a lot more outstanding than me, since their windows are square. Like they're square, you can't miss it. Mine is arched. So like, again, if you don't walk under the window, which that's basically crossing into a property that is not yours when all is done. So it looks arched and looks fine, especially when I take out that board. More than, I think, 6 to 7 properties right on that street have vinyl windows, square, big vinyl windows. So I'm not outstanding to the streets, especially to the fact that I'm making sure I'm leaving the hardware door over there, that's, the main thing you see when you walk. You'll see that the nice historic door. I'm leaving everything as is. So making sure it looks good. In addition to those windows, like I said, there's also the concrete in the front to the right-hand side. I'm leaving that also. So another thing I wanted to add over there is going back to the contractor. So the contractor over here, not only that I paid him and he screwed me up, and I'm not coming to be victimize myself, but just laying down the facts. When we hopefully get to closing, if we're able to get to closing, I paid him tens of thousands of dollars for his subcontractors. Like I said, he was my boots on the ground and the project manager. And when I landed here, I found out that he didn't pay them and they put liens on the property. I have lien waivers that I paid everything, but it doesn't matter because that was from the general contractor. So I learned that not only that, now I have about $23,000 of liens waiting from those subs. I think one is 11,700, one is around 10,700, something like that. So that's an additional thing that I told the investors, listen, whatever I could get you back, I'll get it. I can't promise I will be able to get you back anything because in addition to that, I was supposed to be done with this project at $115,000. I could send you the bid if you want. And I'm right now at almost $330,000. If you deduct the cost of buying the house, which was $8,800, I think. So we're talking around $230,000, which is more than twice what I was planning to pay. So as I said, I do want to keep the front the best historic as I don't want to outstand, and I could tell you that I'm not outstanding if you go and look at the street because there are some more vinyl windows. But if I could take off those boards, I'll be more than happy to do that. I'm looking now at the picture, and actually I went there again today to see the top. Bethany, can you show the one that you showed before? So maybe if someone stops and looks really, really, really good, so he might see like 3 inches of that square. If you want, I'll ask the lender to give me more money and to pay a good carpenter to make that arch from the outside, trim it in wood. So that way those 3 inches will make sure those won't be, you can't see them. So that I could ask, he told me he won't give me money. By that, if I'll need, I'll ask friends something for a loan. But I could tell you that the other properties I did until now, I made sure that they'll be right up to code and basically exactly how the area or the neighborhood is requiring. And of course, I want the neighborhood to look good and not all of a sudden this weird thing in the middle. So I'm basically requesting from the board to grant me a variance that allows me to keep the current windows based on the fact that I left my country in order to take care of this, and based on the fact that I paid people all my money and they basically left with it and did a bad job. Again, if you look at the contract that I sent you with the project manager, you'll see that he was in charge of all that. That's why I paid him. And that's why I took loans to pay him, and he didn't do the job. And of course, based on the fact that there are a lot more vinyl windows, and I'm still doing everything to keep the property historic. And like I said, if we need, we'll trim those. The other top, 3 in the second floor and the 2 on the third floor, you can't really see. So but I'm saying that also the 2 front ones, if need, I'll get a loan, hopefully to trim that top. I hope also that if you approve not to do that, since you can't really see it from the street, because it is arched outside, not like the vinyl windows outside. And like I said, I'm out. Like I came to do that, and the second I'll be able to finish it, give back whatever to the people. My money, like I said, I'm out. I lost it. So that's basically my request to the board. And of course, I'll be more than happy also to answer any question in just a moment. But if you want daily follow-up, you see that the property is still historic through the end of the rehab. I'll be more than happy to do anything I need to do on that end.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Robinson, any questions?
No.
Commissioner Richardson, any questions?
No.
Commissioner Killeen, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Alderman Coder, any questions?
No questions.
Commissioner Hamilton, any questions? Commissioner Vines, any questions?
No.
Okay, thank you all very much. Bethany, who have we got?
To speak on it?
Yeah.
Who is here to speak on it?
Do we have anyone who would like to speak on it? We do not currently have anyone on the list.
Okay, is there anybody in this chat who would like to speak on this? Okay, hearing none, thank you. Commissioners, that concludes the testimony in this matter. Commissioner Killeen, have you got a motion?
I do not.
Commissioner Richardson, have you got a motion?
Yes, that the Preservation Board uphold, I move that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial of the application to retain the vinyl windows on the primary facade as they do not meet the requirements for replacement windows outlined in the Fox Park Local Historic District standards.
Is there a second?
Second by Code.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll call a roll. Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
The ayes have it, and the appeal is denied.
Can I appeal this decision for a second, just to basically offer one more solution?
No. Yeah, please talk to Bethany or Dan after this meeting. Next appeal, 4552 Westminster Place.
I'm Andrea Gagan, Cultural Resources Office, and I'm here to tell the truth. This is 4552 Westminster Place. I need to enter into the record the enabling ordinance 64689 as amended by 64925, the Central West End Historic District Ordinance 69423, PowerPoint, the agenda item, and the application. All these exhibits will be available to review on our website. Okay, this is the building in question. The Cultural Resources Office received a complaint about all the installation of windows without a permit, and a stop work order was issued on March 3rd, 2020. The applicant then applied for a Cultural Resources permit to retain 7 windows in the front of the building that were installed without a permit. The applicant replaced the existing wood windows with aluminum historic replacement windows, which is not allowed under the West End Historic District standards. Some background, the applicant applied for permits for the rehabbing the building March 4th, 2019. That permit was issued May 3rd of 2019, with the front windows proposed to be restored. I had worked with the architect since February and told him that aluminum windows were not allowed on the front facade of the building. And I also want to point out that there was a note on our window list on our website at the time that noted that the Central West End Historic District may have additional restrictions on replacement windows in regard to and to contact us, basically. The windows do not comply because they are aluminum. It is also not clear whether the long window above the porch doesn't appear to replicate what was there before. Previously on the bottom sash, it appears, that's just location. These are the previous windows, including that long window. You sort of see at the bottom of that window, there are some narrow muttons that do not appear to be replicated in the window that replaced it. These are a view of the existing windows that were installed. And just some context on either side of the building. The Central West End this morning, email this morning, and this will confirm our conversation this morning, in which I advise the Center and Planning Committee support for the staff recommendation that the Preservation Board deny the applicant's appeal regarding unauthorized replacement of the reference address and assign J. Wire Chair. Because the windows do not meet the standards of their aluminum, and so that the almonds does not appear to match what was roughly was there. The Cultural Resource Office recommends the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial of the application if it does not comply with the Central Westminster Local Historic District standards. And I also wanted to mention this is not the first chapel order that we've had to issue with this company in the Central West End. I believe that we need to issue 3, not all in this building, but they're rehabbing several buildings in the Central West End. I believe that's it. Got questions?
Great. Commissioner Vines, a question? Commissioner Hamilton, a question?
No questions. Sorry.
Alderman Coder, a question?
Yeah, if you could, at the very end there, Ms. Gagan was discussing, I guess, other violations with this particular development team. Could she repeat that and speak up just a little bit so I could hear that again?
Yes, I was just saying that our office is, this is the third staff work order our office has done on buildings being rehabbed by this developer in the West End. And there, I forgot also to mention that there's one other violation actually on this building that we don't have. It does not match what was approved on the last year's permit. And that is, and you can sort of see on this slide on the left side, the handrail on the balusters on that handrail were replaced, and under the approved permit, it was supposed to be a historic rail, and I believe it said it was also supposed to be painted, and neither of those things happened.
Thank you. Nothing further.
That's not on this permit.
Commissioner Killeen, a question?
No question.
Commissioner Richardson, a question?
No questions.
Commissioner Robinson, a question?
No.
Okay, Andrea, thank you very much. Okay, let's hear from the appellant. And thank you very much for your patience.
Hello, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I hope I'm like your last person, so I hope I can be short and sweet with this. I do have a presentation to present, but I do feel that I should address some of the things that were brought up in the cultural resources description from Andrea. I have been in contact with...
Yes. I'm sorry, one thing I forgot to do.
Yeah.
State your name for the record.
Okay, sorry, my name's Katie Casey.
And your address?
My home address or the office? The office is 16052 Swingley Ridge Road in Chesterfield.
Wherever we can find you again.
Yeah. Well, you can't find me there now, but usually on a good day you can.
Noted. And the testimony going to be the truth?
Yes, sir.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. So I just wanted to address some of those things. First of all, I started and have been managing this project since January of 2020. And since then, I have had regular contact with Bethany and Andrea based on some of the things that have been brought up. We did have a project manager before who unfortunately didn't apply for things or go back and reapply for things as he should have. And unfortunately now I am tasked with fixing all of that. So ever since I got, back from maternity leave and started in January, I've started to address, some of those stop work orders. They did say multiple properties in Westminster. We actually have 2 on the same street, but those are the only 2 properties that we're working on in the Central West End. And I have remedied the other stop work orders they're referring to at 4731 Westminster. So I'm happy to address any of those. Have talked with Bethany. We got the stop work order lifted. Work is now being performed and we are in compliance. We have all the permits that we need to have. So I just wanted to reiterate that because it sounded kind of bad. And then I would like to go through the presentation of 4552 and just let you know how the situation here unfolded, and how it came to be. And then I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I'm gonna go fast so that you guys can all get back to your evening. I have to as well. I have 2 young kids. So like I said, my name's Katie Casey. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. I just wanted to point out that the initial investment for the windows at this property were made in March of 2019 under the previous project manager. In terms of the permit that it was applied for, it was approved, and at that time we had planned to restore the windows. Unfortunately, during the demolition part of, you know, the bad structure, and we found some things there that we said, okay, this is not safe, it's not structurally sound, and these windows aren't going to perform. We were under the impression that at the time the project manager had gone back, you know, said the scope with cultural resources and had, you know, gotten things taken care of. That is what he had presented to the team. So we did confirm that these are historic windows. These are actually historic windows from the historical standards list, the Crown in 1400. And being that these are such big historical windows, the entire investment for the property was $19,842. So that did not include labor. That was simply for the windows. 10,000 of that was the front 7 street-facing windows. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to show you here, the top is some of the pictures that Andrea and Bethany showed you was when we purchased the property. And the bottom picture is as of today. The goal was always just to maintain the same style. We were not going to change any of the sizes. We actually did keep the original wood trims on the windows. So really the only thing that changed was the actual window itself. In terms of the window on top of the porch, that is, the porch itself is structurally unsound. We have to take care of that. Right now in its current state, it cannot be used as a porch. And so it was, you know, replaced with the same type of window, being that it's not functional space. We truly did not realize that a violation had been made until we received the stop work order from Bethany on March 5th, which is almost a year after our initial investment. At that point, I contacted Bethany. You know, we had some communication. She informed me that, you know, the permit to actually replace the windows wasn't turned back into them. So at that point, I went to City Hall. I met with Bethany. I applied for the permit. The permit was approved for the rest of the house, but she did inform me that because the front 7 windows were aluminum clad on the front and wood on the inside, that they would have to deny that portion of the permit, and that we would have to appeal to the preservation board. And that is what led us, you know, to appeal to you today. Bethany, or could you please go to the next slide? Okay, so based on the fact that we have put a large amount of money into this property, we converted it from a 2-family unit to a single-family unit. It's a gorgeous property. I mean, it is absolutely beautiful. It's very unique. We're actually going to talk to you about the facade later in a different meeting, but this property is amazing, and I hope you all get a chance to, you know, go there and see it. So we've really tried to bring like the uniqueness back and the beauty. That's why we we're not trying to change the style of the window at all. This was an honest mistake, and we've invested a lot into the property structurally as well that we weren't anticipating. So the cost and the budget has been exceeded. And in this current environment for a small business like ours, spending another 20 to 24,000 on top of something that we hadn't anticipated would be very crippling to us and to our business. But I just wanted to give you a few quotes that I've gotten for all wood. Since Bethany pointed out the error that we made, that we picked a window that was on the street facing side and not the front facing side. I took that list again, reviewed it, and tried to get some additional quotes just so you could see the impact that it would have if we were required to replace these windows. You can go to the next slide. Okay, just given that this was truly an honest mistake, I have been committed since January. I'm newly into this role. I'm learning. I'm, trying to, this is my first meeting, my first preservation board meeting. Trying to work with cultural resources. I've been very communicating very well, definitely with Andrew. We have a good relationship, and moving forward, I have contacted them and will continue for any outward changes that we make. Like, all these things have fallen into my plate. I'm thankful for them. Unfortunately, here I am. I'm the one, begging you guys for mercy, and to let me keep the windows at this property, to not incur, the extra costs and the impact that it'll have to our business. But totally understand and support your inputs and your decision today. But I just wanted to close it out here and just say thank you so much for your time. Please consider, the full overall scope of this project, the impact it could have to our business, and just the environment that we're in. And I thank you guys so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, we have questions for the appellant. Commissioner Vines, you've got a question?
No questions.
Commissioner Hamilton, a question?
No.
Alderman Coder, a question?
No questions.
Commissioner Killeen, a question?
No.
Commissioner Richardson, a question?
No questions.
Commissioner Robinson, a question? Bethany, is there anybody in the queue, the waiting room, or the room to speak on this subject?
No.
Okay, commissioners, that concludes the testimony in this subject. Commissioner Killeen, have you got a motion?
I do. I move that the Preservation Board uphold the director's denial as the windows do not meet the Historic District standard.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, there's a motion on the floor. It's been made and seconded. I'm going to call a roll. Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Vines, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no? I do not record a vote from Commissioner Robinson. Okay, the motion passes. The appeal is denied. Thank you very much. Commissioners, is there any further business that we have?
4 hours later, no. Nope.
Hearing no further motion, hearing no further business, do I hear a motion that we stand adjourned?
So moved.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. We are adjourned. You may exit the Zoom chat room.
Thank you.
Staff, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah. Pretty good at it.
You have a good evening. Thank you.